Beth Hartley's frozen fingers couldn't hold the train ticket any longer. It slipped from her glove and disappeared into the Montana snow, taking her last chance at escape with it. Behind her, the stagecoach that brought her to Silver Creek was already gone. Ahead, nothing but a dying town and winter darkness. She'd been cast out by her dead husband's family, called barren and worthless, and now she was stranded in a blizzard with 17 cents to her name. Then she heard his voice cut through the wind. "Ma'am, you look like you could use some help." If you want to see how far this story travels, follow it to the very end and comment what city you're watching from. Now let me tell you what happened next. The cold hit different in Montana. Beth had known cold in Philadelphia, the kind that made your cheeks pink and sent you hurrying toward warm parlors and hot tea. This wasn't that. This was the kind of cold that didn't ask permission. It just took. Took your breath. Took your hope. Took your belief that tomorrow might be better than today. She stood on the platform at Silver Creek, watching the stagecoach disappear into white nothing, and felt that cold settle into her bones. 27 years old. Widow. Childless. Unwanted. The words her mother-in-law had spoken 6 days ago still burned despite the freeze. "You couldn't give my son a child in 4 years of marriage. What use are you to this family now that he's gone?" Beth had tried to speak to defend herself, but Martha Hartley wasn't interested in explanations about God's will or medical complications or the fact that her precious son had been sick for 2 of those 4 years. "I've purchased your ticket west." Martha had continued cold as the Philadelphia winter. "My cousin runs a boarding house in Cheyenne. Perhaps she'll have work for you. Perhaps not. Either way, you're no longer my concern." The cousin in Cheyenne had taken one look at Beth, no references, no skills, no children to prove her worth, and found excuses. "Times are hard. We're full up. Try further north. Montana Territory might have opportunities." Always further, always north, always away. Until she'd run out of money in Silver Creek, a town that barely qualified as a settlement. One main street, a handful of buildings fighting against the wind, and a train station where the ticketmaster had just told her the next train east wouldn't come for 6 days. 6 days. She had 17 cents. Beth picked up her carpetbag, everything she owned fit inside it, and turned toward the town. The wind hit her face like a slap. Snow was falling harder now, the kind that erased roads and buried hope. "Miss," the ticketmaster called from his window. "You got someplace to go?" "The boarding house." "Ain't got one. Mrs. Chen runs a restaurant with 2 rooms upstairs, but she don't take lodgers this time of year. Says the cold makes people desperate and desperate people steal." Beth's throat tightened. "Is there anywhere—" "Church might take you in. Reverend Wright's got a charitable nature." He paused. "Most times." She found the church at the end of the street, a simple wooden building with a cross that leaned slightly left. The door was locked. A sign nailed beside it read, "Gone to Bozeman. Back Lord willing." The Lord wasn't willing, apparently. Beth sat on the church steps and tried to think. The cold made it hard. Her mind kept circling back to the same impossible question. What now she couldn't go back east? Wouldn't. The humiliation of returning to Martha Hartley's doorstep begging for scraps would kill her faster than this Montana winter. She couldn't stay here. 17 cents wouldn't buy 6 days of survival. She couldn't go forward. There was nowhere left to go. So she sat on those church steps and watched the snow fall, and for the first time since Robert died, she let herself cry. Not the quiet, respectable tears she'd shed at his funeral. Real crying. The kind that came from somewhere deep and hopeless. That's when she heard the wagon. Beth looked up to see 2 horses pulling a supply wagon down the main street. A man drove it tall, even sitting down. His hat pulled low against the snow. But it was the children beside him that made her breath catch. A girl, maybe 11, sitting ramrod straight despite the cold. A boy younger pressed against the man's side for warmth. The wagon stopped in front of Mrs. Chen's restaurant. "Stay close," the man said, his voice a deep rumble that carried across the empty street. "Don't wander." "Yes, Papa," the girl said, but her tone suggested she had no intention of obeying. The boy said nothing, just stuck his thumb in his mouth and stared at Beth with wide, curious eyes. The man helped both children down gentle, despite his size, and started toward the restaurant. Then he paused, turned and looked directly at Beth. She should have looked away. Should have pretended she wasn't a woman crying on church steps in a blizzard. But something in his face stopped her. He had storm-gray eyes that had seen too much, and a jaw set against more than just cold. "Ma'am," he said, tipping his hat. "You all right?" The question was so unexpected, so genuinely concerned, that Beth almost started crying again. "I'm fine," she lied. He studied her for a long moment, took in her carpet bag, her fancy Philadelphia coat that wasn't made for Montana winters, the way she was shivering despite trying not to. "You don't look fine." "I'm waiting for someone." "In this weather on church steps?" Beth lifted her chin. "My business is my own, sir." Something flickered in his eyes. Respect, maybe. Fair enough. He turned to go, but the little boy tugged on his coat. "Papa, she's cold." "Lucas, don't—" "She's crying, Papa, like when Mama—" "Lucas." The man's voice went sharp, not angry, but firm. "Inside, now." The girl grabbed her brother's hand and pulled him toward the restaurant, shooting Beth a look that was pure suspicion. But the man lingered. "Look, ma'am, I don't know your situation, and I won't pry. But if you need help, I don't need charity." Wasn't offering charity, was offering common decency. There's a difference. Beth's hands clenched around her carpet bag. Pride wanted her to refuse to insist she was fine to preserve some shred of dignity. But pride wouldn't keep her alive for 6 days with 17 cents. "The boarding house is closed," she heard herself say. "The Reverend's gone to Bozeman. The next train doesn't come for 6 days. And you got nowhere to go." It wasn't a question. Beth nodded, not trusting her voice. The man was quiet for a moment, snow gathering on his hat brim. When he spoke again, his voice was careful, like he was choosing each word with precision. "My name's Daniel McCormick. I run the Diamond M Ranch about 8 miles north of here. I came to town looking for supplies and—" He paused. "And to see if the Reverend might know any women looking for work." Work. Housekeeping. Cooking. Looking after children. He glanced toward the restaurant where his kids had disappeared. "I've been managing on my own for 7 years since my wife died, and I ain't managing well anymore." Beth's heart started beating faster. "You're offering me employment." "Might be, if you're capable." "I can cook, clean. I helped raise my younger cousins back in Philadelphia." "Philadelphia." He said it like it explained everything. "City woman." Heat flushed through Beth's cold cheeks. "Just because I'm from the city doesn't mean I'm incapable of hard work." "Didn't say you were incapable. Said you were from the city. That's a fact, not an insult." "Then what is it?" "A concern." Daniel shifted his weight, and Beth noticed he favored his left leg slightly. Old injury. War, probably. "Montana winters kill city folk who don't know what they're up against. The work I'm talking about ain't managing a Philadelphia townhouse. It's frontier living. No running water. No gas lamps. No neighbors for miles. Just work day after day until you fall into bed too tired to dream." "I'm not afraid of work." "Everyone says that." "I mean it." He studied her face, those gray eyes, seeing too much. "You running from something law debts a man. I'm running from a life that ended when my husband died." The words came out harder than Beth intended. "His family cast me out because I couldn't give him children. They called me worthless and put me on a stagecoach west with nothing but dismissal. So no, Mr. McCormick, I'm not running from the law or debts or a man. I'm running from being nobody." The silence stretched between them, filled only by wind and falling snow. Then Daniel nodded slowly. All right. All right. I'll give you a chance. Trial period, 1 month. You work the house help with the children, prove you can handle frontier life. If it works out, we'll discuss permanent arrangements. Relief flooded through Beth so fast it made her dizzy. Thank you. I won't. I ain't finished. His voice went quieter, more serious. What I'm about to say is going to sound improper, but I need you to hear me out before you decide. Beth's stomach clenched. I'm listening. The thing is, ma'am, I don't just need a housekeeper. I need... He stopped, removed his hat, ran a hand through dark hair that needed cutting. My daughter Rachel's been running the household since she was 4 years old. She's 11 now, and she's harder than most grown women I know. My son Lucas has nightmares every night about the mama he barely remembers. And I've got a neighboring rancher named Harrison Blackwood who's been trying to force me to sell my land for 3 years. What does that have to do with... Blackwood's been pushing me to marry his daughter Victoria. Says it would unite the properties and settle the water rights dispute between our ranches. But I don't love Victoria, and she don't love me. She's 20 years old and wants to marry a banker's son in Helena, but her father won't allow it unless he gets my land some other way. Beth's chest tightened. Mr. McCormick, what exactly are you proposing? He met her eyes dead on. Marriage. Not the real kind, not in the way you're thinking. A business arrangement. You'd have a home security protection from whatever you're running from. My children would have a mother, and Blackwood would have no leverage to force his daughter on me or challenge my water rights. The world tilted. You want to marry me? Beth's voice came out as a whisper. You don't even know my name. Beth Hartley, right? You said it when you mentioned Philadelphia. That's not the point. The point is, we're both desperate. He said it plainly, without shame. You need a home. I need help. Marriage solves both problems. Marriage is supposed to be about love. Love didn't save my first wife. The words came out harsh, then he softened. I'm sorry. That was cruel. But I learned the hard way that love don't keep people alive in this territory. Survival does. Partnership does. And right now, you and I both need to survive. Beth's mind raced. This was insane. Marrying a stranger she'd met 20 minutes ago, moving to an isolated ranch with 2 children who didn't know her, entering a business arrangement that would legally bind her to a man who'd just admitted he couldn't love her. But what choice did she have? 6 days until the next train. 17 cents. Nowhere to go. Nobody who wanted her. If I agreed, she said slowly, what would you expect from this arrangement? Honest work. Help with the house and children. Respect. He paused. Separate bedrooms. I won't touch you in any way you don't want to be touched. This would be a marriage on paper for practical purposes. Nothing more unless both of us decided otherwise somewhere down the line. And if it doesn't work, if I can't handle frontier life or your children hate me or... Then we'll figure it out. I ain't a monster, Mrs. Hartley. If this arrangement fails, I'll make sure you get to wherever you want to go with enough money to start over. You have my word. Beth looked past him toward the restaurant where his children waited. Through the frosted window, she could see them sitting at a table, the girl rigid and watchful, the boy small and lost. Broken children, a broken man, a broken woman. Maybe they could build something from all these shattered pieces. I have conditions, she said. Daniel's eyebrows rose. All right. If we do this, I want a real partnership, not you making all the decisions while I follow orders. I want my opinions to matter. Agreed. And your children, I won't try to replace their mother, but I won't be treated like a servant in front of them either. If I'm going to be their stepmother, I need your support when they challenge me, because they will challenge me. I expect they will. He almost smiled. Especially Rachel. One more thing. Beth's voice shook, but she forced it steady. If we do this, we do it proper. Real wedding. Real vows. I won't have people thinking I'm just some desperate woman who trapped you into a sham marriage. Whatever this arrangement is, it starts with honesty and respect. Daniel was quiet for a long moment, snow gathering on his shoulders. Then he extended his hand. "You got yourself a deal, Mrs. Hartley." Beth stared at his hand, work-roughened, scarred across the knuckles, capable of gentleness, despite its size. This was it, the moment everything changed. She could take his hand and step into an unknown future, or refuse and face 6 days of winter with 17 cents. She took his hand. His grip was warm and firm, and somehow made the cold less terrifying. "We'll need to find Reverend Wright," Daniel said. "He's in Bozeman, but I know where he's staying. We can ride there, get married, and be back to the ranch by dark if we leave within the hour." "Within the hour?" Beth's voice pitched higher. "I just agreed to this 5 seconds ago. You want time to think about it." "No. Yes. I don't know." She pressed her free hand to her stomach, trying to calm the panic rising there. "This is insane." "Probably." Daniel released her hand. "But insane don't mean wrong. Sometimes the craziest choice is the only one that makes sense." Before Beth could respond, the restaurant door banged open and both children emerged. The girl marched straight up to her father, her face set in furious lines. "Papa Lucas says you're talking to that lady about her being our new mama. Tell him he's wrong. Tell him you wouldn't do something that stupid." Daniel crouched down to his daughter's level. "Rachel." "No." The girl's voice cracked. "You promised. You promised nobody would replace Mama. You promised." "And nobody will replace her." Daniel's voice was gentle but firm. "Your mama was special, and she'll always be your mama. But Rachel, we need help. You know we do. You've been working yourself to exhaustion trying to run that house. I can handle it. You're 11 years old, baby girl. You shouldn't have to handle it." Rachel's eyes filled with tears she refused to let fall. "She'll leave, just like Mama left. Everyone leaves." "Your mama didn't leave. She died. There's a difference." "It feels the same." The boy Lucas had been standing behind his sister, but now he stepped forward. His thumb was in his mouth again, his eyes locked on Beth. "Are you going to be our mama?" he asked. Beth's throat closed. What was she supposed to say to this child? How could she promise anything when she didn't know if she'd survive a month in Montana? "I'm going to try," she said finally. "If you'll let me." "Will you read to us? Mama used to read to us before she—" His voice got small. "Before." "Yes, I'll read to you." "Will you make breakfast? Papa burns everything?" Despite everything, Beth almost smiled. "I'll make breakfast." "Will you stay?" The question came out as a whisper. "Will you promise not to leave like Mama did?" Beth looked at Daniel, saw the pain in his eyes, the fear. Then she looked back at Lucas, and spoke the only truth she had. "I can't promise I won't die, sweetheart. Nobody can promise that. But I can promise I won't choose to leave. I'll stay as long as I'm wanted and needed. That's the best promise I can make." Lucas studied her with eyes too old for his face. Then slowly he nodded. Rachel, however, wasn't satisfied. "Papa, this is crazy. You don't even know her." "I know enough." "You knew Mama for 6 months before you married her. And look how that—" Rachel stopped, horror crossing her face. "I'm sorry. I didn't mean—" "It's all right, Ray." Daniel stood his hand on his daughter's shoulder. "You're scared. I understand. But I need you to trust me. Can you do that?" Rachel looked at Beth with pure fury. "If you hurt my papa or my brother, I'll make you sorry. I don't care if you're a grown woman and I'm just a kid. I'll find a way." "Rachel Marie McCormick." "It's all right," Beth interrupted. She crouched down to Rachel's level, making herself vulnerable. "You're protecting your family. That's brave. And you're right not to trust me yet. I haven't earned it, but I will. I promise you, Rachel, I will earn your trust. Promises don't mean nothing. Then I'll show you with actions instead of words." The girl stared at her, looking for weakness, for lies, for anything that confirmed her worst fears. Beth stared back, refusing to look away. Finally, Rachel turned to her father. "I still think this is stupid." "Noted. And I'm not calling her Mama. Nobody's asking you to. And if she tries to change anything about how we do things, then we'll talk about it as a family. All of us together." Daniel looked at Beth. "That acceptable to you?" "More than acceptable." "All right then." He straightened his hat. "Mrs. Hartley, if you're still willing, we've got a reverend to find and a wedding to get to before this blizzard gets worse." Beth picked up her carpetbag and looked at the three faces watching her: Daniel, with his storm-gray eyes and old war wounds; Rachel, with her fierce protectiveness and buried grief; Lucas, with his desperate hope and thumb-sucking fear. Her new family. God help them all. "I'm willing," she said. And just like that, Beth Hartley stepped off the church steps and into a future she couldn't have imagined that morning. The ride to Bozeman took 3 hours through snow that tried its best to kill them. Beth sat in the back of the wagon, wrapped in a blanket Daniel had given her, watching Montana Territory roll past in shades of white and gray. Rachel sat up front with her father, spine straight, refusing to acknowledge Beth's existence. Lucas sat beside Beth, his small body pressed against hers for warmth. "You're really gonna marry Papa?" he asked quietly. "Yes." "How come?" "Because I have nowhere else to go. Because your father offered me survival when I had none. Because sometimes desperation looks like destiny." "Because he asked," Beth said instead. "And because I think we might be able to help each other." "Rachel says you're just using Papa for his money." "I don't want your father's money, Lucas. I want a home. There's a difference." "What's the difference?" Beth thought about that. "Money is something you take and leave. A home is something you build and stay for." Lucas considered this, then nodded. "Okay." They found Reverend Wright at a boarding house in Bozeman, warming himself by a fire, and looking surprised to see Daniel McCormick standing in his parlor with a strange woman and 2 children. "Daniel, what brings you out in this weather? Need you to perform a wedding, Reverend?" Wright's bushy eyebrows climbed toward his hairline. "A wedding today in a blizzard, if you're willing." "And the bride is—" "Beth Hartley, sir." Beth stepped forward, trying to look like a woman who made rational decisions instead of desperate ones. "Recently widowed. From Philadelphia." "Philadelphia." The Reverend looked between them, clearly trying to piece together how a Philadelphia widow ended up in Montana, about to marry a rancher she'd presumably just met. "This seems rather sudden." "It is," Daniel admitted. "But we're both of sound mind and acting of our own free will. That's sufficient. I'd like to speak with Mrs. Hartley privately first, if you don't mind." In the Reverend's small office, surrounded by books and the smell of old paper, Wright studied Beth with kind but sharp eyes. "Are you being coerced, Mrs. Hartley?" "No." "Are you aware this marriage will be legally binding?" "Yes." "And you understand you'll be living on an isolated ranch caring for 2 children who aren't yours, partnered with a man you don't know?" Beth met his eyes. "I understand all of it, Reverend, and I'm still choosing this." "Why?" The question was gentle but demanded truth. "Because the alternative is worse," Beth said quietly. "I have no family, no money, nowhere to go. Mr. McCormick is offering me a chance to be useful again, to matter to someone. That might not be romantic, but it's honest." Wright was quiet for a moment. "And what about love-child marriage should be built on more than utility?" "I had love, Reverend. I married my husband because I loved him and thought we'd have a lifetime together. Then he got sick and died, and his family threw me away like I was nothing. Love didn't protect me. It didn't save me." Her voice hardened. "Maybe practical arrangements are more honest than romantic ones. That's a bitter philosophy for one so young." "Maybe, but it's the one I'm living with." The Reverend sighed, then nodded. All right, Mrs. Hartley. If this is truly your choice, I'll perform the ceremony. But I want you to remember something. What? Marriage vows are sacred, whether spoken from love or necessity. Once you make this commitment, you'll be bound to Daniel and those children in the eyes of God. That's not something to take lightly. I'm not taking it lightly, Reverend. I'm taking it seriously. Maybe that's better. The ceremony was brief and businesslike, performed in the Reverend's parlor, with only the children as witnesses. Rachel stood rigid and disapproving. Lucas watched with wide, confused eyes, and Beth barely heard the words through the roaring in her ears. When Wright asked if she took Daniel to be her husband, her voice shook. I do. Daniel's voice was steady and sure when he made his vows. If he had doubts, they didn't show. You may kiss the bride, Wright said. Daniel leaned down. God, he was tall, and pressed a brief, chaste kiss to Beth's lips. It was over in a second, but it was enough to make it real. She was married again. To a stranger. In Montana. In a blizzard. God help her. As they signed the marriage certificate, Lucas tugged on Beth's sleeve. Are you our mama now? Beth looked at Daniel, asking silent permission. He nodded. I suppose I am, she said softly. Good. Lucas slipped his small hand into hers. I'm glad. Rachel said nothing, just stared out the window at the falling snow, her jaw set against feeling anything. On the ride back to the ranch, Daniel spoke for the first time in an hour. You all right? I don't know what I am. That's fair. He kept his eyes on the road. For what it's worth, I'll do right by you. I know this ain't what you planned for your life. Nothing about my life has gone according to plan, Mr. McCormick. Probably time you called me Daniel, seeing as we're married now. Daniel, she tested the name, and you should call me Beth. Beth. He said it quietly, like he was trying it out. Suits you better than Mrs. Hartley. They fell back into silence, but it felt less heavy than before. The Diamond M Ranch appeared on the horizon, just as full dark settled in. Beth's first thought was that it looked like a fortress against the wilderness main house barn outbuildings, all fighting to hold their ground against Montana winter. It's bigger than I expected, she said. My father started with 40 acres and a prayer, Daniel said, and she heard pride beneath the exhaustion. Built it up to 1,200 before he died. I've been trying to maintain it, but... He trailed off. But it's hard to run a ranch and raise children alone. Yeah. A woman emerged from the house as they pulled up, tall, raw-boned, with gray-streaked hair, and a face that had seen too much to be surprised by anything. About damn time, she called. Children need their beds, Daniel McCormick. I was starting to think you'd... She stopped short, spotting Beth. Who's this? Agnes, this is my wife. Beth. Beth, this is Agnes O'Brien. She's been cooking and cleaning here since my father's time. Agnes's jaw dropped. Your wife, Daniel, what in the name of... We were married this evening by Reverend Wright. Married today, to a complete stranger. That about sums it up. Agnes looked like she'd been struck by lightning. Her eyes moved from Daniel to Beth and back. Have you lost your mind? Possibly. Married without telling anyone. Agnes. Daniel's voice went firm. It's done. Beth will be taking over household management. I'd appreciate it if you'd help her settle in and learn how things work here. Oh, we will definitely talk tomorrow, Agnes muttered. But she stepped aside to let them pass. Inside the house was solid and practical main room, serving as kitchen and living area, big stone fireplace, sparse furniture. Everything clean, but cluttered with the particular disorder of a household without a woman's organizing touch. Rachel, Lucas, say goodnight to Agnes and head upstairs, Daniel said. But Papa, Lucas began, now. After the children disappeared up the stairs, Agnes rounded on Daniel. Explanation, now. I needed help. Beth needed a home. We made an arrangement. An arrangement? You mean this ain't a real marriage? It's real enough. Daniel's jaw tightened. Legal. Binding. Everything it needs to be. Agnes turned to Beth. And you agreed to this? I did. Why? Because I was out of options and your employer made me an offer. I'm not proud of the circumstances, but I'm grateful for the opportunity. Something flickered in Agnes's eyes, maybe approval, maybe just surprise. Well, at least you're honest about it. She showed Beth to a bedroom upstairs, the former mistress's room, though Agnes didn't say that explicitly. It was beautiful in a faded way lace curtains, handmade quilt vanity, with a silver brush set. But everything was covered in dust and the air smelled stale. This was Daniel's first wife's room, Agnes said quietly. He hasn't let anyone touch it since she died. You'll be the first. Beth's chest tightened. What was she like? Agnes was quiet for a long moment. Sarah was delicate, like a hothouse flower trying to survive a prairie winter. She wasn't built for this life, but she tried. God, she tried. The isolation drove her mad, though. By the time Lucas came, she was already... Agnes shook her head. The childbirth just finished what Montana started. Daniel loved her. In his way. But love ain't enough out here. You need strength, resilience, the will to survive when everything's trying to kill you. Agnes studied Beth. You got that in you. I guess we'll find out. After Agnes left, Beth sat on the edge of the bed, her bed now, and tried to process everything that had happened in the last 12 hours. This morning, she'd been nobody sitting on church steps in a blizzard with 17 cents. Tonight, she was Beth McCormick, wife to a stranger, stepmother to 2 broken children, mistress of a Montana ranch she'd never seen before. Tomorrow she'd have to figure out how to survive it all. But tonight, for the first time in months, she had a roof over her head and a door she could lock. It wasn't much, but it was more than nothing. And right now, more than nothing felt like everything. Beth woke to the sound of someone crying. For a moment she forgot where she was. The room was too dark, the bed too unfamiliar, the air too cold. Then memory crashed back. Montana Marriage McCormick. She was Beth McCormick, now lying in a dead woman's bed, listening to a child weep somewhere in this house that was supposed to be her home. She wrapped the quilt around her shoulders and followed the sound down the hallway. Lucas's door was cracked open, lamplight spilling into the corridor. Beth pushed it wider and found the boy sitting up in bed, tears streaming down his face, his small body shaking. Lucas. He looked at her with eyes that didn't quite see her, still caught in whatever nightmare had hold of him. Beth crossed to the bed and sat on the edge. Sweetheart, you're safe. You're home. It was just a dream. Mama, he sobbed. Mama was drowning and I couldn't reach her. I tried, but she kept going under, and Papa said it was my fault. He said I killed her. No. Beth pulled him against her, feeling his heart hammer through his thin nightshirt. No, Lucas, that's not true. Your mama's death wasn't your fault. Do you hear me? It wasn't your fault. But she died having me. Rachel says so. Rachel says if I hadn't been born, Mama would still be alive. Beth's arms tightened around him. Over the boy's head she saw Rachel standing in the doorway, her face white with shock and guilt. I didn't mean... Rachel started. Out, Beth said quietly. Now. But... out. Rachel fled. Beth held Lucas until his sobs quieted to hiccups, until his breathing steadied, until the nightmare's grip finally loosened. Listen to me, she said, pulling back to look at his face. What happened to your mama was a tragedy. A terrible, unfair tragedy. But it wasn't because of you. You were a baby. Babies don't kill their mothers. Sometimes women die in childbirth and it's nobody's fault. It just happens. Papa won't talk about it. He gets quiet and sad and Rachel gets angry and I don't know what I'm supposed to feel. You're supposed to feel whatever you feel. Sad or confused or angry or all of it at once. There's no wrong way to miss someone you love. Lucas wiped his nose on his sleeve. Did you have a mama? I did. She died when I was 12. Does it stop hurting? The question pierced Beth's chest. She thought about lying, about offering false comfort. But this child deserved truth. "No," she said softly. "It doesn't stop hurting. But it hurts different as time passes. Less sharp. More like an ache you carry instead of a wound that bleeds. I don't want to carry it forever." "I know, sweetheart. But sometimes we don't get to choose what we carry. We just get to choose how we carry it." Lucas leaned against her, exhausted from crying. "Will you stay until I fall asleep?" "Of course." She sat with him, stroking his hair the way her own mother used to do until his breathing deepened into sleep. Then she tucked the blankets around him and went to find Rachel. The girl's room was dark, but Beth could see her outline sitting by the window, staring out at the snow-covered land. "I know you're angry," Beth said from the doorway, "and I know you don't want me here, but we need to talk about what you said to your brother." "I didn't mean for him to hear it." "That doesn't make it less harmful." Rachel's shoulders hunched. "It's true, though. Mama wouldn't have died if Lucas hadn't been born. That's just fact." Beth crossed to the window and sat down, giving Rachel space but staying close enough to matter. "Your mama died from complications during childbirth. That's not the same as your brother killing her. One is a medical tragedy. The other is murder. Do you understand the difference?" "I understand Mama's gone and he's here. And you blame him for that. Somebody has to be blamed." "Why?" The question seemed to catch Rachel off guard. Because bad things don't just happen. Someone has to be responsible. Sometimes bad things do just happen. Sometimes there's no villain, no one to blame. There's just loss and grief and the impossible work of surviving it. Rachel turned to look at her for the first time. In the moonlight, her young face looked ancient with pain. "You don't know what it's like. You just got here. You don't know anything about us." "You're right. I don't know what it's like to lose my mother when I'm 4 years old. I don't know what it's like to spend 7 years being the woman of the house before you're old enough to understand what that means. I don't know what it's like to watch your father marry a stranger out of desperation." Beth paused. "But I do know what it's like to be blamed for things that aren't my fault, and I know what it's like to carry anger that has nowhere to go. My mother-in-law blamed me for not giving her son children," Beth continued. "She said I was worthless without them. She said God was punishing me for some sin I must have committed, and for a long time I believed her. I thought maybe she was right. Maybe I was defective. Maybe I deserved to be cast out." "Did you?" Rachel's voice was barely audible. "No. And neither does Lucas deserve to be blamed for your mother's death. He's a little boy who lost his mama before he could even know her. That's punishment enough." Silence stretched between them. Outside, wind howled through the eaves, making the house creak and settle. "I'm scared," Rachel finally whispered. "I'm scared you'll leave like Mama did. I'm scared Papa will die too. I'm scared Lucas will figure out I'm a terrible person and hate me. I'm scared all the time and I don't know how to stop." Beth's throat tightened. "Come here." "I don't need." "Come here anyway." Slowly, reluctantly, Rachel crossed the room. Beth pulled her into a hug, and the girl's rigid spine finally collapsed. She cried against Beth's shoulder. 7 years of tears she'd been holding back. 7 years of being strong when she should have been allowed to be a child. "I've got you," Beth murmured. "I've got you, and I'm not letting go." When Rachel's tears finally subsided, she pulled back and wiped her face roughly. "I'm still not calling you Mama." "I didn't ask you to. And I still think Papa made a mistake marrying you." "That's fair. But maybe you're not completely terrible." Despite everything, Beth smiled. "I'll take it." The next morning came too early. Beth woke to pale dawn light and the smell of something burning. She threw on her dressing gown and hurried downstairs to find Agnes at the stove cursing in what sounded like Gaelic while smoke poured from a skillet. "Let me," Beth said, taking the pan and dumping its charred contents into the slop bucket. "What were you trying to make?" "Breakfast. But Daniel likes his eggs a certain way and the bacon has to be crisp but not burned, and I swear that man has more opinions about food than the good Lord has about sin." Beth almost laughed. Where is Daniel? Out with the hands. Been up since before dawn checking the cattle. Winter's hard on them, and we lost 3 head last week to the cold. And the children? Still sleeping if they've got any sense. Agnes handed Beth a bowl of eggs. You really know how to cook, or was that just talk yesterday? I can cook. My mother taught me, and I ran my husband's household for 4 years. Philadelphia household ain't the same as frontier cooking. Then teach me the difference. Something shifted in Agnes's expression. All right. First lesson, everything takes longer out here. Water has to be hauled from the well. Fire has to be built and maintained. We don't have fancy gas stoves or servants to do the work. You'll be on your feet from dawn till dark. And if you're smart, you'll learn to do 3 things at once. For the next 2 hours, Agnes taught Beth the rhythms of frontier cooking. How to manage the wood stove's temperamental heat. How to stretch ingredients to feed a household of ranch hands. How to make biscuits that would stick to a working man's ribs. Beth's hands cramped and her back ached, but she refused to complain. When Daniel came in for breakfast, covered in snow and smelling like hay and horses, he stopped short at the sight of Beth in an apron flour dusting her sleeves. You're up early. Couldn't sleep. Heard crying last night. Lucas? He had a nightmare. I sat with him until he settled. Daniel's jaw tightened. He gets them most nights. Sarah used to sing to him, but I don't. I can't. I'll handle it. You don't have to. I'm his stepmother now. It's my job. Beth set a plate in front of him. Eggs and bacon. Agnes says you're particular about how they're cooked. He looked down at the plate, then up at her, something unreadable in those storm-gray eyes. Looks perfect. The children came down while he was eating. Lucas immediately went to Beth's side, slipping his hand into hers. Rachel hung back, watching them all with wary eyes. Morning, Papa, Lucas said. Morning, son. Sleep all right after? Beth stayed with me. She said Mama dying wasn't my fault. Daniel's fork clattered against his plate. His eyes found Beth's, and she saw something crack in his careful control. She's right. It wasn't your fault, Lucas. I'm sorry if I ever made you think. You didn't, Papa, but Rachel did. Every head turned to the girl. She flushed red, but lifted her chin. I said I was sorry. To me, Lucas challenged. I'm saying it now. I'm sorry. I was wrong. The words came out stilted, forced, but genuine. Mama dying wasn't your fault. It was just terrible and unfair, and I wanted someone to blame. Daniel stood slowly. Rachel, come here. She went to him, and he pulled her into a hug that looked like it hurt them both, all the affection they'd been denying themselves for years, suddenly breaking through. I'm sorry, too, he said roughly. I should have talked to you about this. Should have made sure you understood. I was just so I couldn't face it, but that wasn't fair to you, to either of you. Beth turned away, giving them privacy, and found Agnes watching her with sharp eyes. You've been here one day, the older woman said quietly. One day, and you've already cracked open wounds this family's been ignoring for years. Is that a good thing or a bad thing? Depends on whether the wounds can heal or just bleed out. The morning passed in a blur of work. Agnes showed Beth the house's routine's laundry, hauled and heated and scrubbed by hand floors that needed constant sweeping against tracked-in snow lamps, that needed filling fires, that needed tending. By midday, Beth's arms ached and her hands were raw, but she kept moving. Rachel appeared in the kitchen while Beth was kneading bread dough. Agnes says I'm supposed to help you. Do you want to help me, or are you just following orders? The girl considered this. Both, I guess. Fair enough. You can start by peeling those potatoes. They worked in silence for a while, the only sounds the thunk of Rachel's knife and the rhythmic slap of dough against the wooden board. You really sat with Lucas all night? Rachel finally asked. Until he fell asleep. Maybe an hour. He hasn't let anyone comfort him since Mama died. Papa tries, but Lucas just freezes up. I try, but he knows I blame him. She paused. Blamed him. He's a little boy who needed his mother and got me instead. That's not ideal for anyone. You're not so bad. Beth glanced up. That might be the nicest thing you've said to me. Don't get used to it. But there was almost a smile in Rachel's voice. That afternoon, a rider came up to the house. Beth saw him through the kitchen window, a well-dressed man on a fine horse, followed by two other men who looked like hired muscle. Agnes cursed when she saw them. That's Harrison Blackwood. And he's brought company. Should I get Daniel? He's out on the North Range. Won't be back for hours. Agnes wiped her hands on her apron. I'll handle this. But Beth followed her outside anyway. Blackwood dismounted with the ease of a man who'd spent his life on horseback. He was perhaps 50, handsome in a cold way, with silver threading through his dark hair, and eyes like winter ice. Mrs. O'Brien, he said, tipping his hat. Where's McCormick? Working his ranch, Mr. Blackwood, as you should be doing on yours. I heard an interesting rumor in town yesterday. His gaze slid past Agnes to Beth. Something about Daniel getting married. To a stranger. On the same day they met. What of it? I'd like to meet this mysterious bride. Make sure she's real and not some convenient fiction. Beth stepped forward before Agnes could respond. I'm Beth McCormick, Daniel's wife, and I assure you I'm quite real. Blackwood's eyes traveled over her with insulting thoroughness. Philadelphia from your accent. How did a city woman end up married to a Montana rancher? That's between my husband and me. Is it, though, because it seems awfully convenient? I've been trying to unite our properties through marriage for 3 years. My daughter Victoria is a lovely girl well-suited to frontier life. But Daniel kept refusing, said he wasn't ready. Then suddenly he marries a complete stranger. Blackwood smiled, and it didn't reach his eyes. Forgive me for being suspicious. My marriage to Daniel is legal and binding. If you doubt that, feel free to ask Reverend Wright. He performed the ceremony. Oh, I don't doubt you have a marriage certificate. I doubt you have a real marriage. I think this is a scheme to avoid my very reasonable offer. And I think when people start asking questions, and they will ask questions, your hasty arrangement won't hold up to scrutiny. Beth's hands clenched in her skirts. Are you threatening me, Mr. Blackwood? I'm stating facts, Mrs. McCormick. If that feels like a threat, perhaps you should examine why. One of Blackwood's men leaned down and whispered something in his ear. Blackwood's smile widened. I hear you have no children from your previous marriage. 4 years, wasn't it? That's a long time to prove barren. One might wonder if Daniel knows what he's gotten himself into. Heat flooded Beth's face. Part shame, part rage. My ability to bear children is none of your concern. It is when it affects property rights. You see, if this marriage is just a legal maneuver and not a genuine union, it can be challenged, annulled, and then Daniel will be right back where he started, facing my very reasonable offer. Reasonable, Agnes spat. You've been harassing him for 3 years, trying to force your daughter on him. My daughter is 20 years old and deserves a good match. Daniel McCormick with his land and water rights would have been perfect, but if he's chosen to marry this desperate widow instead, well. Blackwood shrugged. I suppose we'll see how long this arrangement lasts. He remounted his horse, his men following suit. Give Daniel my regards, Mrs. McCormick. Tell him I'll be watching his new marriage with great interest, and if I find any evidence it's fraudulent, I'll make sure the territorial authorities know about it. They rode off, leaving Beth shaking with anger and something darker fear. Don't let him rattle you, Agnes said. Blackwood's been making threats for years. He's all bark. He knows about my first marriage, about the children I couldn't have. How? Small territory. People talk. Agnes put a hand on Beth's shoulder. But that doesn't make what he said true. You're Daniel's wife now, legal and proper. Blackwood can't change that. He can try to prove it's not genuine. Then we'll prove him wrong. But as Beth went back inside, Blackwood's words echoed in her mind. Barren. Fraudulent. Desperate. All the things she'd tried to escape by coming west now following her into this new life. Daniel came home just before dark, covered in snow and exhausted. Beth had supper waiting venison stew. Agnes had taught her to make biscuits that were only slightly lopsided coffee strong enough to strip paint. He ate in silence while the children told him about their day. Lucas had helped Agnes feed the chickens. Rachel had finished mending all the socks that needed repair. Normal domestic things that felt almost precious after Blackwood's visit. After the children went to bed, Beth told Daniel what had happened. His face went hard as she described the encounter, his jaw clenching when she repeated Blackwood's threat. "He had no right to speak to you that way." "But he did. And he's going to challenge our marriage, Daniel. He as much as promised it." "Let him try." Daniel stood and paced to the window, staring out at the dark. "Our marriage is legal. We have witnesses. We have Reverend Wright's certification. Blackwood can kick up all the dust he wants, but he can't change facts. Unless he convinces people the facts are lies." Daniel turned to look at her. "Are you having second thoughts? About what?" "This, us, the arrangement." His voice was carefully neutral. "Because if you want out, I'll understand. I won't make you stay in a situation that's become more complicated than you bargained for." Beth thought about it, really thought about it. She'd been married to this man for exactly 24 hours. She barely knew him. She'd stumbled into a land dispute she didn't understand, inherited 2 damaged children, and apparently made an enemy of the most powerful rancher in the territory. She should want out. But she thought about Lucas's small hand in hers, about Rachel's tears against her shoulder, about Agnes teaching her to make biscuits, and Daniel's quiet, "looks perfect" over breakfast, about having a purpose again, mattering to someone again, being somebody instead of nobody. "I'm not going anywhere," she said. Something in Daniel's rigid posture relaxed. "You sure? I made vows yesterday, in front of God and your children. I meant them. Even though you barely know me. I know enough. I know you're a good father who puts his children first. I know you're honest even when honesty is inconvenient. I know you work hard and carry more than you should alone." She paused. "That's enough to build on." Daniel crossed to where she stood. In the lamplight, his face looked younger, less carved by grief and responsibility. "You're not what I expected." "What did you expect?" "I don't know. Someone more broken, I guess. Someone who'd collapse at the first real challenge." "I am broken," Beth said. "But broken doesn't mean weak. Sometimes it just means you've survived things that should have killed you." He studied her face for a long moment. "I'm glad you're here, Beth. I know that's not romantic or poetic, but it's true. I'm glad." "I'm glad too." They stood there in the quiet kitchen, the house settling around them, and Beth felt something shift. Not love. They weren't there yet, might never be there. But partnership, recognition, the beginning of trust. It was enough. The next week fell into a pattern. Beth rose before dawn to help Agnes with breakfast. She learned to manage the temperamental stove, to make coffee that could wake the dead, to stretch ingredients into meals that fed hungry men. Her hands developed calluses. Her arms grew stronger. Her back learned to endure. The children slowly began to accept her. Lucas followed her everywhere, chattering about everything and nothing, desperate for attention. Rachel maintained her distance, but stopped actively resisting. Small victories, but victories nonetheless. Daniel remained polite, but remote. They lived like cordial strangers, sharing space, passing in doorways, exchanging necessary information, careful never to touch or presume intimacy. At night, Beth slept in Sarah's old room, while Daniel took the small office downstairs. Separate. Safe. Exactly what they'd agreed to. But sometimes, Beth would catch him watching her with an expression she couldn't read. And sometimes, she'd find herself noticing things about him, the way he gentled his voice when talking to Lucas, the patience he showed Rachel, the careful way he removed his boots so he wouldn't track mud through the house she'd just cleaned. Small things. Human things. Things that made him real, instead of just the stranger she'd married. On the 7th day, snow fell so thick they couldn't see the barn from the house. Daniel and the ranch hands worked in shifts, making sure the cattle didn't freeze. Agnes cursed the weather and made enough soup to feed an army. The children grew restless, cooped up inside with nothing to do. Beth found them fighting in the afternoon, Rachel holding Lucas's favorite toy horse above her head while he cried and jumped for it. "Give it back," Lucas shouted. "Make me... Both of you stop." Beth's voice cut through the chaos. "Rachel, give Lucas his toy. Lucas, stop screaming." "She started it." "I don't care who started it. I'm ending it." Beth took the toy from Rachel and handed it to Lucas. "Now both of you sit down and listen to me." They sat sullen and defiant. "I know you're bored. I know being stuck inside is hard. But taking your frustration out on each other isn't acceptable. You're family. You're supposed to protect each other, not hurt each other." "He was being annoying," Rachel muttered. "And you were being cruel. Both of you can do better." "Mama used to play games with us when we were stuck inside," Lucas said quietly. "She'd tell us stories and make us laugh, and it didn't feel so bad." "I'm not your mama." "We know that," Rachel snapped. "But I am here. And if you're willing, I can tell you a story. It won't be the same as what your mama did, but it might help pass the time." Lucas's face lit up. "Really?" "If you want." They wanted. Beth settled into the rocking chair by the fire, and both children sat at her feet. Lucas curled up like a puppy, Rachel maintaining her distance, but listening. She told them about Philadelphia, about growing up in a townhouse that got smaller every year as her father's money disappeared. She told them about sneaking books from her father's library and reading by candlelight when she was supposed to be sleeping. She told them about her mother teaching her to play piano on an instrument they couldn't afford to keep. "Why'd your father lose his money?" Rachel asked. "Bad investments. He trusted the wrong people." "Papa says trust is dangerous," Lucas said. "Papa says you should only trust people who earn it." "Your papa's right about that." "Have you earned it?" Rachel's question was sharp testing. "I'm trying to, every day." Rachel studied her for a long moment. "I guess that's all anyone can do." That night after the children were in bed, Beth found Daniel in his office working on ranch accounts by lamplight. "Can I come in?" He looked up surprised. "Of course." She sat in the chair across from his desk, suddenly uncertain. "I wanted to ask you something." "All right. How did Sarah die? I know it was childbirth, but I'd like to know the whole story, if you're willing to tell it." Daniel's pen stilled. For a long moment she thought he'd refuse. Then he set it down carefully and leaned back. "She was sick before Lucas came, had been for months. The doctor said another pregnancy would kill her, told her flat out not to try." His voice went rough. "But Rachel kept asking for a sister, kept saying she felt lonely, that our family felt incomplete. And Sarah wanted to make everyone happy, wanted to fix what she thought was broken in our family. What happened? She got pregnant anyway. Hid it from me for 4 months because she knew I'd..." He stopped. "When I found out, I begged her to listen to the doctor, to be careful. But she just smiled and said God would provide, said everything would be fine. But it wasn't. The labor lasted 3 days. 3 days of listening to her scream, watching her get weaker, knowing there was nothing I could do. Lucas came out, fine, healthy, perfect. Sarah bled for 6 hours after. Doctor couldn't stop it. She died just before dawn, and her last words were, 'I'm sorry.'" Beth's throat ached. "I'm so sorry, Daniel. The thing is, I wasn't just grieving. I was angry. Furious that she'd chosen this, that she'd risked everything for what, another baby we didn't need, to make Rachel happy, to prove something to God." His hands clenched. "And then I looked at Lucas, this perfect, innocent baby, and I couldn't. I couldn't love him the way I should, because every time I looked at him, I saw what he cost." "Do you still feel that way?" "No, God no. Lucas is my son and I love him. Daniel's voice cracked. But it took me years to separate him from Sarah's death in my mind. Years to stop blaming an infant for existing. And by then the damage was done. Rachel had figured out that babies kill mothers. Lucas had figured out he was somehow guilty. And I'd figured out that love was dangerous because it made people make stupid choices. Beth understood then. Understood why he'd proposed a loveless marriage. Why he kept everyone at arm's length. Why he seemed so determined not to feel anything too deeply. Love doesn't always make people stupid, she said quietly. Sometimes it makes them brave. Brave or stupid looks pretty similar from the outside. Maybe, but one leads to growth and one leads to... She gestured around the sparse office, the cold house, the careful distance he maintained. This. Daniel flinched. I'm protecting my children. You're protecting yourself, and teaching them that feeling nothing is safer than feeling anything. That's not... Lucas has nightmares every night because he's terrified of being abandoned. Rachel's so scared of loss she pushes everyone away before they can leave. You're so walled off you proposed marriage to a stranger rather than risk actually knowing someone. Beth leaned forward. This isn't protection, Daniel. This is just a different kind of dying. And you're an expert on living. The words stung because they were true. No, I'm just as damaged as you are, but at least I'm trying to heal instead of treating my wounds like armor. Silence crashed between them. Then Daniel's face crumpled slightly. I don't know how to be any different. Neither do I, but maybe we can figure it out together. He looked at her, then really looked at her, and Beth saw past the walls to the man beneath, scared and lonely, and so tired of carrying everything alone. I want to try, he said finally. I want to be better. For Lucas and Rachel. For you. But I don't know if I can. Then start small. Let me help you. Stop trying to do everything alone. Trust me with some of the weight you're carrying. What if I trust you and you leave? What if you don't trust me and I stay? You'll have wasted whatever time we have together protecting yourself from something that's not even happening. Daniel rubbed his face, exhaustion making him look older than his 34 years. This isn't what I thought marriage would be like. Mine either. But maybe that's not a bad thing. Maybe we can build something better than what we expected. Maybe. He stood and moved to the window. Outside, snow was still falling, burying the world in white. Beth. Yes. Thank you. For telling the children about Sarah. For sitting with Lucas. For trying with Rachel, even though she's making it hell for you. She's scared. Fear makes people cruel. Is that why you're so kind? Because you know what it's like to be scared. Beth considered this. I'm kind because I know what it's like when nobody else is. When you're alone and desperate and everyone's turned their back. I won't do that to others, not if I can help it. Daniel turned to look at her, and something in his expression made her breath catch. You're a remarkable woman, Beth McCormick. I'm a stubborn one. There's a difference. Maybe they're the same thing. He crossed to where she sat and did something he hadn't done since their wedding day. He touched her. Just a hand on her shoulder, brief and careful, but it felt like a promise. Good night, Beth. Good night, Daniel. But as she climbed the stairs to her lonely bedroom, Beth felt something unfamiliar warming her chest. Not love, not yet, but possibility. The beginning of connection. The tentative reach of two broken people toward something that might eventually become whole. Outside, the snow kept falling. Inside, slowly, carefully, a family began to heal. The summons came 3 weeks later. Beth was kneading bread dough when Agnes burst through the kitchen door, her face white with fury, waving a folded paper. That bastard actually did it. What happened? Harrison Blackwood filed a complaint with the territorial court. Says your marriage to Daniel is fraudulent. Says it's a sham arrangement designed to circumvent his legitimate business interests. Agnes slapped the paper onto the table. There's going to be a hearing, 2 weeks from today, in Silver Creek. Beth's hands stilled in the dough. A hearing. To determine if your marriage is legal or if it should be annulled. Agnes's voice shook. He's really doing this. He's going to try to destroy your family in front of the whole damn territory. Daniel came in from the barn and went still when he saw their faces. What's wrong? Beth handed him the summons without a word. She watched his jaw tighten as he read, watched the muscle jump in his cheek, watched fury and fear war across his features. When... His voice was deadly quiet. 2 weeks. Judge Morrison's coming from Helena to preside. Agnes wrung her hands. Daniel, this is bad. Morrison's known to be sympathetic to established landowners. Blackwood's got money and influence. If he convinces the judge your marriage isn't genuine, then what? They dissolve it, and Beth gets thrown out with nothing. I end up forced to marry Victoria or sell my land. Daniel crumpled the paper in his fist. Like hell. Papa. Rachel stood in the doorway, Lucas behind her. What's happening? Beth saw Daniel struggle with how much to tell them. She stepped in before he could decide to lie. Mr. Blackwood is challenging our marriage. He's claiming it's not real. There's going to be a hearing where a judge will decide if Papa and I should stay married. Lucas's face crumpled. They can take you away. They're going to try. No. The boy ran to Beth and wrapped his arms around her waist. No, you can't leave. You promised you'd stay. You promised. I promised I wouldn't choose to leave. I'm not choosing this, sweetheart. Then fight it. Rachel's voice was sharp, fierce. Don't just let them take you. Beth looked at Daniel over the children's heads. What do we do? He was quiet for a long moment, thinking. When he spoke, his voice was calm but hard as iron. We prove them wrong. We prove our marriage is real in every way that matters. How? However we have to. That night, after the children were asleep, Daniel knocked on Beth's bedroom door. She opened it to find him standing in the hallway, still dressed, holding 2 cups of coffee. We need to talk about strategy. She let him in, and they sat her on the bed, him in the chair by the window, and tried to figure out how to convince a judge their marriage was genuine when they both knew it had started as anything but. They'll ask how we met, Daniel said. We tell them the truth. You were stranded in Silver Creek. I needed help. We made a practical decision. That sounds exactly like what Blackwood's claiming. Then we emphasize what's happened since, how you've become part of this family, how the children have bonded with you. In 3 weeks, nobody bonds that fast. We did. Daniel met her eyes. Didn't we? Beth thought about Lucas's hand in hers, about Rachel's tears on her shoulder, about standing in this kitchen learning to make biscuits while Agnes cursed in Gaelic, about Daniel's careful touch on her shoulder 3 nights ago. Yes, she said quietly. We did. Then we tell them that. We tell them about Lucas's nightmares and how you're the only one who can calm him. We tell them about Rachel learning to trust again. We tell them this marriage might have started as convenience, but it's become something real. What if they don't believe us? They will, because it's true. He paused. But Beth, there's something else they're going to ask about. Something we need to address. Her stomach clenched. What? Whether we're sharing a bedroom. Whether the marriage has been consummated. His ears went red, but his voice stayed steady. It's going to come up. Blackwood will make sure of it. And right now, anyone who looks can see we're sleeping separately. You said separate bedrooms. That was our agreement. I know. And I'm not suggesting we change that unless you want to. But we need to appear as though we're husband and wife in truth, not just on paper. Beth's hands twisted in her lap. What are you proposing? That I move my things into your room. That we sleep in the same bed even if nothing happens. Just to maintain appearances. You want to share a bed with me? I want to protect our marriage. If that means sharing a bed, then yes. And you promise nothing will happen, you won't. Beth. Daniel's voice was gentle but firm. I gave you my word on our wedding day that I wouldn't touch you in any way you didn't want. That hasn't changed. This is about survival, not that. She believed him. God help her. She believed him. And maybe that was the strangest part of this whole arrangement, that she trusted this man she'd known less than a month more than she'd ever trusted anyone. "All right," she said. "Move your things in tomorrow. We'll start acting like a real married couple, in public and in private." "Thank you." "Don't thank me yet. We still have to convince a judge we're telling the truth." Daniel stood to leave, then paused at the door. "Beth, for what it's worth, this stopped being just an arrangement for me about 2 weeks ago. I don't know when it happened exactly, but somewhere between watching you gentle Lucas through his nightmares and seeing you stand up to Blackwood and listening to you call me out on my bullshit somewhere in there, this became real." Her breath caught. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying I care about you, not because you're useful or convenient. Because you're you. Because you're brave and stubborn and kind even when kindness costs you. Because when I think about you leaving, it feels like losing something precious." He looked away. "I know that's not what we agreed to. I know I said this would stay practical, but I can't seem to help it." Beth's heart hammered against her ribs. "Daniel, you don't have to say anything back. I just needed you to know, before we go into that hearing, before we stand in front of a judge and swear our marriage is real, I needed you to know that for me at least it already is." He left before she could respond. Beth sat alone in the room that had been Sarah's, staring at the empty doorway, trying to process what had just happened. Daniel cared about her. Genuinely cared. This marriage that had started as desperation had become something neither of them had planned for. And the terrifying part was, she felt it too. Somewhere between learning to make biscuits and defending his children, and watching him gentle horses with those careful hands, somewhere in there, she'd started caring back. The next morning, Daniel moved his clothes into her wardrobe. His shaving kit appeared on the vanity. His boots lined up next to hers by the door. Small changes that made the room feel completely different. That night they lay side by side in the bed that had belonged to his first wife, careful not to touch, staring at the ceiling in the dark. "This is awkward," Beth finally said. "Extremely. Are you comfortable?" "No. You? Not even a little." Despite everything, they both laughed. And somehow the laughter broke. The tension made this strange new intimacy bearable. "Tell me something," Daniel said. "Something I don't know about you." "Like what?" "Anything. Your favorite color, your worst fear, what you wanted to be when you were small." Beth thought about it. "I wanted to be a teacher. I loved books and learning, and I thought maybe I could help other children love them too." "Why didn't you?" "My father couldn't afford to send me to normal school. And then I got married, and Robert's mother thought teaching was beneath our family's station. She said my job was to produce heirs and manage the household, not waste time with other people's children." Did Robert agree with her? Robert never disagreed with his mother about anything. He was kind but weak. He loved me, I think, but not enough to stand up for me when it mattered. Daniel was quiet for a moment. "I'd have let you teach, if you'd wanted to." "Would you?" "Why not? You're good with children. You're patient and smart, and you actually listen to them instead of just talking at them. That's rare." Something warm bloomed in Beth's chest. "Your turn. Tell me something I don't know." "I can't read very well. Never had proper schooling. I can manage ranch accounts and legal documents if I take my time, but books—" He paused. "I've been pretending to read to Lucas at night, just making up stories based on the pictures. He's figured it out, but he's too kind to say anything." "I could teach you?" "I'm 34 years old, bit late for lessons." "It's never too late to learn. If you want to, I could help you." Daniel turned his head to look at her in the darkness. "You'd do that?" "Of course. We're partners, aren't we? Partners help each other." "Yeah." His voice went soft. "We are." They fell asleep like that, talking quietly in the dark, and Beth woke some time before dawn to find Daniel's arm draped across her waist and her head tucked against his shoulder. Neither of them had meant to end up tangled together, but sleep had made them honest. She should have moved away, should have maintained the careful distance they'd agreed to, but his warmth felt good and safe and right, so she stayed where she was until the first light came through the window and forced them both awake. Daniel pulled back immediately. "Sorry, I didn't mean to. It's fine. I wasn't trying to take advantage." "Daniel." Beth put her hand on his arm. "It's fine. We're married. We're allowed to sleep next to each other." "Right." But he still looked uncertain, like he'd crossed some invisible line. The children noticed the change immediately. At breakfast, Lucas climbed into Beth's lap without asking and announced, "Papa slept in your room last night. I heard him snoring." Rachel's fork paused halfway to her mouth. "Did he?" "Yes," Daniel said firmly. "Because Beth is my wife, and married people share a bedroom. Any other observations you'd like to share, son?" Lucas grinned. "Nope." But Rachel was watching them both with sharp, assessing eyes. After the meal, she cornered Beth in the kitchen while Agnes was outside feeding chickens. "Are you and Papa really married now? Like actually married?" "We've been actually married since the day we spoke our vows." "You know what I mean. Are you—" Rachel struggled with the words. "Are you together, or are you still just pretending?" Beth chose her words carefully. "Your father and I are building something real. It might not look like other people's marriages, but it's genuine. Does that bother you?" "I don't know yet." Rachel twisted her apron between her hands. "I spent 7 years thinking nobody could replace Mama, that Papa would stay alone forever, and I'd just keep running the house until I was old enough to marry someone and leave. But then you came and everything changed." Change is scary. It's more than scary. It's, what if I let myself care about you and then you die too? Or what if Papa loves you more than he loved Mama, and I forget what Mama was like? Or what if... Her voice broke. "What if I'm happy, and that means I'm betraying Mama's memory?" Beth pulled the girl into a hug. "Listen to me, Rachel. Your Mama would want you to be happy. Parents don't want their children to suffer forever. They want them to heal and grow and find joy again. Being happy doesn't mean you love your Mama less. It just means you're living the life she would have wanted for you. How do you know? Because I had a Mama too, and when she died, I thought being sad forever was the only way to honor her. But you know what? She would have hated that. She would have wanted me to laugh and love and live. That's what good parents want for their children." Rachel clung to her, small and vulnerable, in a way she rarely allowed herself to be. "I'm glad you're here, Beth. Even though I was mean at first, even though I tried to make you leave, I'm glad you stayed." "Me too, sweetheart." The days before the hearing passed too quickly. Beth and Daniel practiced their story until they could recite it without thinking how they met, why they married, what their life together looked like. They made sure to touch casually in front of others, to use given names instead of formal address, to act like a couple who'd chosen each other instead of two desperate people who'd made a bargain. But the touching stopped being entirely for show. Daniel's hand would find the small of Beth's back when they walked. Her fingers would brush his arm when she poured his coffee. They'd catch each other's eyes across the room and smile for no reason except that they wanted to. Agnes watched it all with knowing eyes. "You two are either the best actors I've ever seen, or this marriage is becoming exactly what you're claiming it is." "Does it matter which?" Beth asked. "Not to me, but it might matter to that judge." The night before the hearing, Beth couldn't sleep. She lay next to Daniel, listening to his breathing, trying not to think about what tomorrow might bring. If they lost, if the judge ruled their marriage fraudulent, she'd be back where she started. Nobody with nowhere to go. Worse than that, she'd lose Lucas and Rachel and Daniel, and this life she'd somehow built from nothing. "You're thinking too loud," Daniel murmured. "I can hear your brain working from here." "Sorry." "Talk to me." What's got you so worried? Everything. What if we're not convincing enough? What if Blackwood has evidence we don't know about? What if the judge just doesn't like us? Then we'll figure it out. We'll fight back. We'll find another way. What if there isn't another way? Daniel rolled onto his side to face her. In the moonlight filtering through the curtains, his eyes were steady and sure. Beth, listen to me. Tomorrow, we're going to walk into that courtroom and we're going to tell the truth. We're going to tell them exactly how this marriage started and exactly what it's become. And if that's not enough for them, if they still want to tear us apart, then we'll know we did everything we could. I'm scared. So am I. But I'm also angry. Blackwood has no right to challenge our marriage, no right to threaten our family, and I'll be damned if I let him win. What if he does anyway? Then we'll survive it. We've survived worse, haven't we? You survived losing your husband and being cast out by his family. I survived losing Sarah and raising 2 children alone. We're both stronger than we think. And together, he reached for her hand. Together, we're damn near unstoppable. Beth laced her fingers through his. When did you become an optimist? When I married a woman stubborn enough to make me believe things could get better. She laughed despite her fear. I'm not that stubborn. You confronted armed men over a fence line. You stood up to Blackwood without flinching. You gentled a traumatized 7-year-old every single night and somehow got an 11-year-old to trust again. He squeezed her hand. You're the stubbornest person I've ever met, and I'm grateful for it. Daniel. Yeah. If we lose tomorrow, if they dissolve the marriage, I want you to know this was real for me too. Whatever happens, this wasn't just convenience or desperation. You and Lucas and Rachel, you became my family. This became my home. That's the truth. He brought her hand to his lips and kissed her knuckles gently. Then that's what we tell them. And we make them believe it. They fell asleep holding hands, and Beth dreamed of Philadelphia and Montana and all the impossible distances between who she'd been and who she was becoming. Morning came cold and bright. Beth dressed carefully in her best dress, pinned her hair with extra care, and tried not to look as terrified as she felt. Downstairs, Agnes had made a huge breakfast that nobody could eat. You'll do fine, the older woman said, squeezing Beth's shoulder. Just tell the truth and let them see what's right in front of their faces. The children were subdued. Lucas clung to Beth's skirt until Daniel gently peeled him off. We'll be back by supper, son, I promise. What if you're not? What if they keep Beth and don't let her come home? That's not going to happen. But what if it does? Daniel crouched down to Lucas's level. Then I'll fight until it doesn't. You hear me? I won't let anyone take Beth from us, not without one hell of a fight. Rachel stood apart, her face pale but determined. Papa, can we come to the hearing? Absolutely not. But we could testify. We could tell them how much Beth means to us. No. Daniel's voice was firm. I won't put you through that. You and Lucas stay here with Agnes. This is adult business. We're part of this family too. I know you are Ray, but some things you don't need to see. Some fights you don't need to fight. What if you lose? The question hung in the cold morning air. Daniel looked at Beth, then back at his daughter. We won't. The ride to Silver Creek took 2 hours through snow that had frozen hard overnight. Beth and Daniel sat side by side on the wagon seat, not speaking, just drawing strength from each other's presence. The town hall was packed when they arrived. Word had spread about the hearing, and it seemed like half the territory had come to watch. Beth recognized faces from the general store, from church. From that first terrible day when she'd sat freezing on the steps with nowhere to go. Harrison Blackwood stood near the front with his lawyers looking confident and cruel. His daughter Victoria sat beside him, her face miserable, clearly wishing she were anywhere else. Judge Morrison sat behind a makeshift bench, an imposing man in his 60s with steel-gray hair and eyes that missed nothing. All rise for the Honorable Judge Morrison, someone announced, though everyone was already standing. The judge banged his gavel. Be seated. We're here to examine the legitimacy of the marriage between Daniel McCormick and Elizabeth Hartley. McCormick contracted on... He checked his papers. December 10th of this year. Mr. Blackwood, you may present your case. Blackwood stood, and Beth felt her stomach clench. Thank you, Your Honor. My concerns are simple. Daniel McCormick and this woman met on the same day they married. She was destitute, stranded in our town with no money and nowhere to go. He happened to need household help. They concocted a marriage of convenience to serve their mutual interests. She gets security, he gets free labor, and an excuse to refuse my legitimate business proposal. This is fraud, pure and simple, and it makes a mockery of the sacred institution of marriage. Those are serious allegations, Morrison said. Do you have evidence? I do, Your Honor. First, I'd like to call Mrs. McCormick to testify. Beth's legs shook as she stood and walked to the front of the room. Every eye followed her. She felt like a criminal facing execution. Mrs. McCormick. Blackwood began, his voice dripping false politeness. Is it true you met your husband on December 10th? Yes. And married him the same day? Yes. And at the time, you were homeless and penniless. Beth lifted her chin. I was between situations. Between situations. How delicate. Blackwood smiled coldly. Let me be more direct. You were desperate, and Daniel McCormick offered you security in exchange for housekeeping services. Isn't that the truth? That's how it started. But... Thank you. That's all I needed to hear. I wasn't finished, Beth said sharply. Judge Morrison leaned forward. Let her complete her answer, Mr. Blackwood. Beth took a breath. Yes, our marriage started as a practical arrangement. I needed help and Daniel needed help. But what's happened since isn't fraud. We've built a genuine partnership. We've become a family. That's real, regardless of how it began. How convenient that you discovered this genuine affection right when your marriage is being challenged, Blackwood sneered. Tell me, Mrs. McCormick, do you and your husband share a bedroom? Heat flooded Beth's face, but she met his eyes. Yes. And you expect us to believe this is a real marriage, despite the obviously calculated nature of your arrangement? I expect you to believe what's true. Our marriage might not fit your definition of romance, but it's genuine in every way that matters. Blackwood turned to the judge. Your Honor, I submit that this testimony proves exactly what I've alleged. This is a business transaction dressed up as marriage. It should be annulled immediately. I'd like to speak, Daniel said, standing. Mr. McCormick, you'll have your turn. With respect, Your Honor, I'd like it now. Morrison studied him for a long moment, then nodded. Proceed. Daniel walked to the front of the room, and Beth saw every woman's eyes follow him. He was impressive when he was angry, all that controlled power barely restrained. Harrison Blackwood has been trying to force me to marry his daughter for 3 years. When I refused, he challenged my water rights. When that didn't work, he tried to poach my ranch hands. When that failed, he filed this complaint. This isn't about protecting the sanctity of marriage. This is about a powerful man trying to steal my land through legal manipulation. Those are serious accusations, Mr. McCormick, the judge said. Then let me prove them. Victoria Blackwood, would you please stand? The girl stood reluctantly, her face flaming red. Miss Blackwood, do you want to marry me? Papa says. I didn't ask what your father says. I asked what you want. Victoria's hands twisted together. No, I don't want to marry you, Mr. McCormick. No offense intended. None taken. Who do you want to marry? I don't think that's relevant, Blackwood started. Answer the question, Miss Blackwood, the judge said. Thomas Wheeler, the banker's son in Helena. We've been courting for 2 years, but Papa won't allow us to marry unless... She stopped, looking terrified. Unless your father gets my land, Daniel finished. Thank you, Miss Blackwood. You can sit down. He turned to the judge. Your Honor, I married Beth because I needed help and she needed a home. That's true. But what's also true is that she's become the best thing that's happened to my family in 7 years. My son sleeps through the night for the first time since his mother died because Beth sits with him. My daughter smiles again because Beth taught her it's okay to feel happy. And his voice roughened. I'm a better man because Beth makes me want to be. Mr. Blackwood. The judge looked to the lawyer. Any response? But before Blackwood could speak, the doors at the back of the hall burst open. Rachel and Lucas stood there, Agnes behind them looking furious and apologetic at once. I told them to stay home, she hissed. They wouldn't listen. Papa! Lucas ran down the aisle. Papa, you can't let them take Beth away. Judge Morrison banged his gavel. Order. This is highly irregular. Please, Your Honor. Rachel said, her voice steady, despite her obvious fear. Please let us speak. We're Daniel McCormick's children. This affects us too. Morrison looked like he wanted to refuse. Then he sighed. Make it quick. Rachel stepped forward, and Beth had never been more proud of anyone in her life. My name is Rachel Marie McCormick. I'm 11 years old, and Beth is my stepmother. She took a breath. When she first came to our house, I hated her. I thought she was trying to replace my mama. I was mean and cruel, and I tried to make her leave. But she stayed anyway. Miss McCormick, Blackwood began. I'm not finished. Rachel's voice cracked but held. Beth isn't like my mama. She's stronger, and she doesn't give up, and she doesn't die when things get hard. She fights. And she's teaching me to fight too. She's teaching Lucas that he's not responsible for bad things that happened before he could even talk. She's teaching Papa that it's okay to trust people again. Lucas stepped up beside his sister. Beth reads to me every night. She makes breakfast without burning it. She doesn't get mad when I have nightmares. She promised she wouldn't leave, and I believe her. His small voice strengthened. If you take her away, you're breaking her promise. And that's not fair. The courtroom had gone completely silent. Judge Morrison removed his spectacles and cleaned them slowly. Mr. Blackwood, do you have any evidence beyond circumstantial timing that this marriage is fraudulent? The circumstances speak for themselves, Your Honor. That's not evidence. That's speculation. Morrison turned to Beth and Daniel. I've presided over hundreds of marriage cases in my career. I've seen unions built on love fail spectacularly, and marriages of convenience thrive for decades. What I look for isn't romance, it's commitment, partnership, the intention to build a genuine life together. He paused. Based on the testimony I've heard today from you, from your children, from your own admission of how this began, I find this marriage to be legitimate in every legal sense. Beth's knees nearly gave out with relief. However, Morrison continued, and her heart seized again, I'm placing conditions on this ruling. Conditions? Daniel asked. I'll revisit this case in 6 months. If at that time there's evidence this marriage remains genuine, my ruling stands permanently. But if I find evidence of fraud or dissolution, I'll annul it immediately and rule in Mr. Blackwood's favor. Do you understand? We understand, Your Honor, Beth said. Then this hearing is adjourned. The marriage stands. For now. The gavel's bang was like thunder. Blackwood's face went purple with rage. This isn't over, McCormick. Yes, it is, Daniel said quietly. You lost. Accept it and move on. 6 months isn't forever. I'll be watching. And when you slip up, and you will slip up, I'll be right there to finish what I started. He stormed out, dragging Victoria behind him. Lucas launched himself at Beth, nearly knocking her over. Rachel followed more slowly, but no less fiercely. Daniel's arms came around all of them, holding them together in the middle of that crowded courtroom, while people stared and whispered. We won, Lucas said, his voice muffled against Beth's dress. You get to stay. I get to stay, she agreed, her own voice breaking. For 6 months anyway, Rachel said quietly. Then we have to prove it all over again. Daniel pulled back to look at his daughter. What did I tell you about fighting? That some fights are worth it. And this one is. We'll prove Blackwood wrong every single day for the next 6 months. And then he'll have nothing left to challenge. They walked out of that courtroom together, a family real and genuine and earned through pain and choice and stubborn determination not to let others define what they could be. The ride home felt different than the ride there. Lighter somehow, despite the conditions Morrison had placed on their victory. You were amazing, Beth told Rachel. Both of you. What you said in there. We weren't supposed to be there, Daniel interrupted, but there was no real anger in his voice. Agnes, how did this happen? They hid in the wagon bed under blankets. Didn't know they were there until we reached town. Agnes sounded more proud than apologetic. Stubborn as their father. And their stepmother, Rachel added. Beth looked at her in surprise. You called me your stepmother, in court. That's what you are, isn't it? Yes, I didn't think you'd want to acknowledge it publicly. I don't want to lose you publicly, so I acknowledged what's true. Rachel shrugged, trying to look casual, but Beth saw the vulnerability beneath. Is that okay? It's more than okay, sweetheart. It's perfect. That night, after the children were finally asleep and the house was quiet, Beth and Daniel lay side by side in their shared bed, staring at the ceiling. 6 months, she said. We'll make it. Blackwood won't give up. He'll keep looking for evidence, keep trying to prove we're frauds. Then we'll prove we're not. Daniel turned his head to look at her. Beth, what Morrison said today about partnerships and commitment mattering more than romance, he was right. What we have is real. Maybe it doesn't look like other people's marriages, but it's ours and it's genuine, and that's enough. Is it though? What if 6 months from now the judge asks us if we love each other? What do we say? Daniel was quiet for a long moment. Then he rolled onto his side, propping himself up on one elbow to look down at her. We tell him the truth. That I care about you more than I've cared about anyone in years. That I think you're brave and brilliant and stronger than you know. That when I imagine my future, you're in it. That might not be the grand romantic declaration he's looking for, but it's honest. He paused. What would you say? Beth's heart hammered. I'd say the same, that you've given me a home when I had nothing, that you make me feel valued and needed and seen, that Lucas and Rachel have become as precious to me as if I'd birthed them myself, that this life we're building together is the closest thing to happy I've felt in years. That sounds like love to me. Does it? Yeah, it does. They stared at each other in the lamplight, and Beth felt something settle into place. Something that had been building since that first day in the snow when he'd offered her survival, and she'd been desperate enough to take it. I'm falling in love with you, she whispered. I didn't mean to. I wasn't supposed to. But I am. Daniel's hand cupped her face, his thumb brushing her cheekbone. Good, because I'm already there. When he kissed her, it wasn't like their wedding day kiss, brief and chaste and obligatory. This was real, deep, full of promise and possibility, and all the things they'd been too scared to admit they wanted. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Daniel rested his forehead against hers. 6 months, he said, and then a lifetime if you'll have me. I'll have you, Beth said, for 6 months and 60 years, and whatever comes after. Outside, snow began to fall again, gentle and quiet, covering the world in white. Inside, a family slept hard-won and imperfect and absolutely real. And for the first time since stepping off that stagecoach with 17 cents and nowhere to go, Beth felt completely and utterly home. 3 months passed like water through fingers, fast and precious and impossible to hold on to. Winter deepened its grip on Montana, burying the ranch under snow that seemed like it would never melt. But inside the house, something was thawing. Beth woke each morning to Daniel's arm around her waist and thought about how strange it was that this had become normal. That sharing a bed with a man who'd been a stranger 4 months ago now felt more natural than breathing, that his quiet mourning against her hair could make her smile before she'd even opened her eyes. They'd stopped pretending weeks ago, stopped acting for Agnes's benefit or the children's or some hypothetical witness who might report back to Judge Morrison. What they had now was real, messy, and imperfect, and absolutely genuine. Beth loved him. She'd admitted it to herself, even if she was still too scared to say it out loud, except for that one time. And Daniel. Daniel looked at her like she hung the moon, touched her like she was precious, trusted her with his children and his fears and the parts of himself he'd kept locked away for years. It should have been perfect. But Blackwood was still out there watching and waiting for them to fail. The first real test came on a morning when Beth woke feeling wrong. Not sick exactly, just off. Her stomach rolled when Agnes started frying bacon. The smell of coffee made her want to retch. She pushed away from the table and barely made it outside before losing what little breakfast she'd managed to eat. Daniel found her leaning against the side of the house, shivering in the cold. "Beth." "What's wrong?" "I don't know. My stomach." She stopped as another wave of nausea hit. Agnes appeared in the doorway, took one look at Beth's face, and started laughing. "It ain't funny," Beth said weakly. "Oh, honey, when was your last monthly?" Beth thought back. With everything that had happened, the wedding, the hearing, learning to manage a frontier household, she hadn't been paying attention to such things. When she tried to remember, her stomach dropped for reasons that had nothing to do with nausea. 6 weeks, maybe 7. Agnes's smile widened. "Well then, congratulations, Mrs. McCormick. You're carrying." The words didn't make sense at first. Beth stared at the older woman, trying to process what she was hearing. Then understanding crashed over her like ice water. Pregnant. She was pregnant. After 4 years of marriage to Robert with nothing to show for it. After being called barren and worthless and cast out for her failure. After believing she'd never have children of her own. She was pregnant with Daniel's child. "I can't be," she whispered. "I was told I couldn't. My mother-in-law said—" "Your mother-in-law was wrong," Agnes said firmly. "Bodies don't always work on other people's timelines. Sometimes it just takes the right circumstances, the right man." Daniel hadn't moved. He stood frozen, his face white with shock. "Daniel?" Beth's voice shook. "Say something." "Sarah got pregnant 3 times. Rachel lived. 1 was stillborn. Lucas—" He stopped, his jaw clenching. "The doctor said the last pregnancy would kill her. And it did." "I'm not Sarah." "I know you're not. But Beth, childbirth out here, there's no hospital, no real doctor. Just whatever help Agnes and the neighbor women can provide. If something goes wrong, then we'll handle it, together. You don't understand. I can't—" His voice cracked. "I can't lose you. I can't go through that again." Beth crossed to him and took his face between her hands. "Look at me. I'm strong. I survived being cast out by my husband's family. I survived traveling alone to Montana in winter. I survived confronting armed men and standing up to Blackwood in front of the whole territory. I can survive having a baby. You can't promise that. You're right. I can't promise I won't die. But I can promise I'll fight like hell to live. For you. For Lucas and Rachel. For this baby. For the life we're building together." Daniel pulled her against him, holding on like she might disappear if he let go. Against her hair, he whispered, "I'm terrified." "So am I. But we'll be terrified together." Rachel and Lucas took the news with reactions as different as their personalities. Lucas was thrilled, already planning what games he'd teach his baby brother or sister. Rachel went quiet and withdrawn, and Beth found her that evening sitting in her room, staring out at the snow. "You want to talk about it?" "Talk about what?" "About the fact that you're barely speaking to me since we told you about the baby." Rachel's shoulders hunched. "I'm fine." "You're not fine. You're scared." Beth sat on the edge of the bed. "Talk to me, Rachel. Please." The girl was silent for so long, Beth thought she wouldn't answer. Then, in a voice barely above a whisper, "Mama died having Lucas. What if you die having this baby? I won't." "You can't know that. Mama probably thought she wouldn't die either." Beth chose her words carefully. "You're right. I can't guarantee nothing will go wrong. But I can tell you the differences between your mama and me. I'm stronger than she was. I've spent months doing hard physical labor that's made me tougher. I know what to expect because Agnes is teaching me. And most importantly, I want to live more than I've ever wanted anything. That counts for something. It didn't count for Mama. Your mama was sick before Lucas came. The doctor warned her not to get pregnant again, but she did anyway because she was trying to make everyone else happy. I'm not doing that. I'm having this baby because I want to. Because your father and I created something together. That's different." Rachel finally looked at her eyes red-rimmed but dry. "I don't want another brother or sister to blame. One is enough." "Then don't blame this one. If something happens to me, and it won't, but if it does, you promise me you won't punish an innocent baby for it." "How can I promise that?" "Because you're stronger and braver than you think you are. Because you've already learned that blame doesn't fix anything. Because I'm asking you to." Beth took the girl's hand. "Please, Rachel. Promise me." After a long moment, Rachel nodded. "I promise." "Thank you. But you have to promise something too. Promise you'll fight. Promise you won't give up even if it gets hard." "I promise." They sat together as darkness fell hand in hand, both scared of the future, but refusing to let fear win. The pregnancy changed things in ways Beth hadn't expected. Daniel became almost obsessively protective, insisting she rest more, work less, let others handle anything remotely strenuous. It was sweet and suffocating in equal measure. "I'm pregnant, not dying," she told him after he'd forbidden her to carry water from the well. "Women have been doing this for thousands of years." "Not my women." "Your women?" He flushed. "You know what I mean." "I do. And I love that you care. But Daniel, you have to let me live my life. I can't spend the next 6 months sitting in a chair while everyone else works." "The doctor said Sarah needed rest." "I'm not Sarah." The words came out sharper than Beth intended. She softened her voice. "I know you're scared. I know your first wife's pregnancy was difficult. But I'm different. My body is different. This pregnancy is different. You can't protect me from every possible danger." "I can try. And you'll make us both miserable in the process." She took his hand and placed it on her still flat stomach. "This baby needs a mother who's strong and capable, not fragile and afraid. Trust me to know my own body. Trust me to ask for help when I need it. Can you do that?" Daniel's hand trembled against her stomach. "I'll try." It was the best she was going to get. As winter slowly gave way to early spring, Beth's body began to change. Her waist thickened. Her breasts became tender. Morning sickness gave way to a constant gnawing hunger that Agnes found hilarious. "You're eating for 2 now. Makes sense you'd be hungry." "I'm always hungry. It's embarrassing." "Embarrassing is natural. You're growing a human being inside you. That takes work." The children adjusted to the news in their own ways. Lucas talked to Beth's stomach constantly, telling the baby stories and singing off-key songs. Rachel remained cautious, but started knitting tiny booties with fierce concentration, unraveling them when they didn't meet her exacting standards and starting over. Daniel watched it all with a mixture of wonder and terror. At night, when they were alone, he'd rest his hand on her stomach and wait for movement that was still months away. "What if I'm a terrible father to this one?" he asked one night. "I've already failed Lucas and Rachel so many times." "You haven't failed them. You've kept them alive and safe and loved. That's not failure. I was too wrapped up in my own grief to see they were grieving too. I let Rachel become a little adult instead of a child. I let Lucas believe he killed his mother. Those are failures. And you're fixing them now. With my help. That's what matters. Beth laced her fingers through his. This baby is going to have a father who's learned from his mistakes, who knows that children need gentleness and attention, who isn't afraid to admit when he's wrong. That's more than most children get. You really believe that. I really do. But their fragile peace shattered one afternoon in March when a rider came to the ranch at full gallop. Beth was helping Agnes with laundry when she heard the commotion. McCormick, Daniel McCormick. Daniel came out of the barn, his face going hard when he saw the rider. What do you want, Wade? Wade Tucker, the same man who'd tried to cut their fence months ago. He looked panicked, his horse lathered with sweat. It's Mr. Blackwood. He's been hurt bad, thrown from his horse. Doctor says he might not make it through the night. Tucker swallowed hard. He's asking for you. Why would Blackwood ask for me? Don't know. But Miss Victoria sent me special. Said it was urgent. Said he's got things to say before... Tucker couldn't finish the sentence. Daniel looked at Beth. She nodded. Go. Whatever he wants to say, you should hear it. I don't want to leave you. I'll be fine. Agnes is here. The children are here. Go see what Blackwood wants. Daniel rode out within the hour, and Beth tried not to let the worry consume her. She kept busy with household tasks, helped Lucas with his letters, sat with Rachel while the girl knitted. But her mind kept circling back to Daniel and Blackwood and what might happen if the man died with unfinished business between them. He returned just before midnight, looking exhausted and shaken. What happened? Beth asked. Blackwood's dying. Doctor gives him maybe 2 days. Daniel sank into a chair. He wanted to confess. Confess what? Everything. The harassment, the fence cutting, the fraudulent water rights claims. He dictated a full statement to the doctor and a lawyer admitting he'd been trying to force me off my land for years. Said he knew our marriage was genuine but challenged it anyway out of spite. Beth's hand flew to her mouth. Why would he confess now? Because Victoria finally stood up to him. Told him she'd never forgive him if he died with this on his conscience. Told him she'd rather lose the ranch than keep it through cruelty. Daniel's voice was rough. He's leaving everything to her in his will. And she's planning to sell most of it and marry Thomas Wheeler like she always wanted. So it's over. The threat is over. He's writing to Judge Morrison too, withdrawing his complaint, admitting the marriage challenge was baseless. Daniel looked up at her with eyes that held too much emotion to name. We're free, Beth. Really free. No more 6-month probation. No more looking over our shoulders. Just free. Beth should have felt relief, joy, but all she felt was sad for a man so consumed by greed he'd nearly destroyed multiple lives in pursuit of it. I'm sorry he's dying. I'm not. Not really. Daniel stood and pulled her into his arms. Does that make me a terrible person? It makes you human. He tried to take everything from us. You don't have to mourn him. They stood together in the quiet kitchen, holding each other, and Beth felt the last piece of fear fall away. They were safe. Their marriage was safe. Their baby would be born into a family that was legally and genuinely theirs. Harrison Blackwood died 2 days later. His funeral was well attended, but not well mourned. Victoria spoke briefly, her voice steady despite her red eyes. My father was a complicated man. He built an empire but lost himself in the building. I hope he's found peace. After the funeral, she approached Daniel and Beth. I'm sorry for everything he put you through, for the hearing and the threats and the harassment. If I'd been braver sooner, I could have stopped it. You were in an impossible position, Beth said gently. You did what you could when you could. That's all anyone can ask. I'm selling the ranch, dividing the land among the neighbors at fair prices. You'll have the option to buy the parcels adjacent to your property if you want them. Daniel nodded. We might. Thank you, Victoria. And congratulations. On the baby. I hope... She paused. I hope you'll be very happy together." She left for Helena the next week, and Beth never saw her again. Spring came properly after that, melting the snow and turning the prairie green. Beth's pregnancy became obvious to everyone. Her dresses had to be let out. Her walk developed a waddle. Agnes laughed every time Beth complained about her swollen ankles. "Just wait until you're 8 months along in the summer heat, then you'll really have something to complain about." "I'm already miserable." "You're 4 months along and barely showing. You don't know miserable yet." But despite the discomfort, Beth had never been happier. She felt the baby move for the first time in late April, a flutter like butterfly wings against her insides. She grabbed Daniel's hand and pressed it to her stomach. "Did you feel that?" "I don't wait. Was that's our baby." Daniel's eyes filled with tears. "Our baby." Lucas insisted on feeling too, his small hand pressed against Beth's stomach with reverent wonder. "It moved, Mama. It really moved. Mama." He'd started calling her that without prompting, and every time Beth heard it, her heart swelled. Rachel was more reserved, but she touched Beth's stomach too, her face soft with something like hope. "Does it hurt?" "No. It feels strange, but not bad." Mama said it felt like being kicked from the inside. "Sometimes it does, but mostly it just feels like proof that there's a whole person growing in there. A person who's going to need us." "Yes." Rachel looked up at Beth with serious eyes. "I'll help. When the baby comes, I'll help take care of it so you don't get too tired." "Thank you, sweetheart. I'm going to need all the help I can get." As May turned to June, Beth grew larger and more uncomfortable. The summer heat was worse than Agnes had promised. Beth spent most days in her lightest dresses fanning herself and trying not to think about how she still had 3 months to go. Daniel was constantly hovering, bringing her water and pillows and anything else he thought might make her comfortable. It was sweet, but exhausting. "I need you to stop treating me like I'm made of glass," she told him one afternoon. "I'm just trying to help." "I know, but you're making me feel helpless. I need to still be useful. I need to still be me." "You are you. Being pregnant doesn't change that." "Then let me act like it. Let me cook dinner without you trying to take over. Let me hang laundry without you insisting someone else do it. Let me be pregnant and capable at the same time." Daniel studied her face, then nodded slowly. "You're right. I'm sorry. I'm just scared, I know. But fear doesn't keep people safe. It just makes everyone miserable." He pulled her into a careful hug, his hands gentle on her swollen belly. "I love you, Beth McCormick." It was the first time he'd said it outright since that night months ago. The words hung in the warm air between them, precious and true. "I love you too," she whispered back. "So much it scares me." Good scared or bad scared? Good scared. The kind that means I have something precious to lose. They stood together in the summer heat, holding each other and the baby between them. And Beth thought about how far they'd come. From strangers making a desperate bargain to this, a real marriage, a real family, real love earned through survival and choice, and stubborn refusal to give up. July brought the news that Judge Morrison was coming to the territory again. He sent word requesting to visit the Diamond M Ranch as part of his circuit to check on the status of the McCormick marriage. But Blackwood withdrew his complaint. Beth said, reading the letter Daniel had brought from town. "Morrison ruled in our favor. What more does he want? He's probably just being thorough, making sure everything's as it should be." Daniel didn't look worried. "Let him come. We've got nothing to hide." Morrison arrived on a hot afternoon in late July, his buggy kicking up dust as it approached the ranch. Beth was hugely pregnant by then, her belly preceding her through doors, her back aching constantly. She'd long ago given up any pretense of dignity. The judge climbed down from his buggy and stopped short when he saw her. "Mrs. McCormick, you're very pregnant." "Yes, Your Honor." Beth smiled despite her discomfort. "The baby's due in about 6 weeks." "I see. Morrison looked between her and Daniel, and something like approval crossed his face. Well, I suppose that answers most of my questions about the legitimacy of your union. Would you like to come inside? It's cooler in the house. Over coffee and Agnes's cake, Morrison conducted his informal investigation. He asked about their daily routines, how they'd settled into married life, what their plans were for the future. His questions were gentle but thorough, and Beth answered honestly. When I ruled in your favor 6 months ago, I had doubts, Morrison admitted. The circumstances of your marriage were unusual to say the least, but I believed you deserved the benefit of that doubt. He paused. I'm pleased to see I wasn't wrong. We're grateful for your faith in us, Daniel said. Don't thank me yet. I still have questions. Morrison turned to Beth. Mrs. McCormick, you could have left. After the hearing after Blackwood's death removed the threat, you could have walked away from this arrangement. Why didn't you? Because this stopped being an arrangement months ago. This is my home. Daniel is my husband. Rachel and Lucas are my children. This baby... She touched her stomach. This baby is proof that what we have is real. I didn't stay out of obligation. I stayed because I love them. Morrison nodded slowly. Then he called for Rachel and Lucas. The children came in looking nervous, but stood straight when the judge questioned them. Miss Rachel, are you happy with your stepmother? Yes, sir. Rachel glanced at Beth. She's teaching me things, important things, about being strong and not being afraid to feel things. I'm glad she's here. And you, young Lucas, do you consider Mrs. McCormick your mother? She is my mother, Lucas said firmly. Maybe she didn't birth me, but she's my mama. She takes care of me and loves me, and that's what mothers do. Morrison's stern face softened. Out of the mouths of babes. He stood and extended his hand to Daniel. Mr. McCormick, I'm satisfied that your marriage is genuine in every respect that matters. I'll be filing a final ruling removing all conditions and declaring this matter permanently closed. You and Mrs. McCormick are legally and irrevocably married with all rights and privileges that entails. Beth felt tears prick her eyes. It was really over. Really, truly over. After Morrison left, Daniel swept her into his arms carefully, mindful of her belly, and kissed her soundly. We did it, he said against her lips. We actually did it. Did you ever doubt we would? Every single day. But you kept believing, and eventually, I couldn't help but believe too. That night, lying in their shared bed with Daniel's hand resting on her stomach, feeling their baby move beneath his palm, Beth thought about the journey that had brought her here. She'd been nobody, a worthless, barren widow with 17 cents and nowhere to go. Now she was somebody's wife, somebody's mother, somebody's whole world. She mattered. She belonged. She was home. What are you thinking about? Daniel asked. How grateful I am that my life fell apart. If Robert hadn't died, if his mother hadn't cast me out, if I hadn't ended up stranded in Silver Creek, I never would have found this. Found you. Found our family. I'm grateful too. For every terrible thing that happened to bring you here. He kissed her temple, though I reserve the right to curse Blackwood's memory for making it harder than it needed to be. Beth laughed. Fair enough. The baby kicked hard, making them both jump. This one's going to be a fighter, Daniel said. Takes after its mother. And its father, and its siblings. This baby doesn't stand a chance of being anything but stubborn. Good. The world needs more stubborn people, more fighters, more survivors. Daniel pulled her closer, his arms protective around her and their unborn child. I love you, Beth. I'll probably never say it enough or the right way, but I do. More than I thought I could love anyone. That's more than enough, she whispered. You're more than enough. This life we've built, it's more than I ever dreamed of having. Even though it started with desperation. Especially because it started with desperation. We took the worst moments of our lives and built something beautiful from them. That's not despite the pain. That's because of it. Outside, a summer storm was rolling in thunder rumbling in the distance. But inside, wrapped in Daniel's arms, with their children sleeping safely down the hall and their baby growing strong inside her, Beth felt nothing but peace. She'd survived being nobody, and in the process, she'd become exactly who she was meant to be. The pain started on a Tuesday morning in late August, 3 weeks before Beth expected them. She was kneading bread dough when the first contraction hit a tightening across her belly that stole her breath and made her grip the table's edge. Agnes looked up from chopping vegetables and went still. How bad? Not terrible, just surprising. How far apart are they? This is the first one. Agnes wiped her hands on her apron. Could be false labor. First babies like to practice before the real show. But we should pay attention just in case. The second contraction came 20 minutes later while Beth was hanging laundry. This one doubled her over, and she had to breathe through it until the pain passed. That's 2, Agnes said grimly. Where's Daniel? North pasture with the hands, checking fences. Send Lucas to fetch him, now. But before they could call for the boy, Beth's water broke a gush of fluid that soaked her skirts and left her standing in a puddle on the kitchen floor. Well then, Agnes said with forced calm. Looks like this baby's coming today, whether we're ready or not. Rachel, get up here. Rachel appeared at the top of the stairs, took one look at Beth's face and the puddle on the floor, and went pale. Is the baby? The baby's coming. I need you to ride out and get your father. Fast as you can. Then swing by the Henderson place and tell Mrs. Henderson we need her help. You understand? Rachel nodded and ran. Agnes helped Beth upstairs, stripping off her wet clothes and getting her into a clean nightgown. The contractions were coming faster now, harder, each one stealing Beth's ability to think about anything except breathing through the pain. This is too fast, Beth gasped between contractions. First babies are supposed to take hours, days even. Every baby's different. Some take their time, some can't wait to meet the world. Agnes helped her into bed. How you feeling besides the pain, dizzy faint? Scared. That's normal. But you're strong, Beth. You can do this. Another contraction hit, and Beth cried out despite trying to stay quiet. She didn't want to scare Lucas, who she could hear crying downstairs. Daniel burst through the door 15 minutes later, his face white with panic. Beth, I'm fine. She lied, gripping the sheets as another contraction rolled through her. The baby's just early, that's all. 3 weeks early. Beth, that's not what if something's wrong. Nothing's wrong. The baby's just impatient, like its father. Agnes pushed Daniel toward a chair. Sit down before you fall down. You're white as milk. I should do something. Get the doctor. Doctor's in Bozeman delivering twins. Won't be back for 2 days. We're handling this ourselves. Agnes turned to Beth. How close are the contractions? 5 minutes, maybe less. Christ, this baby really is in a hurry. Agnes washed her hands thoroughly. Mrs. Henderson should be here any minute. Until then, Daniel, you're going to help whether you like it or not. What do? Whatever I tell you to. Mrs. Henderson arrived with her daughter Molly, both carrying supplies. They took over with practiced efficiency, and Daniel was relegated to holding Beth's hand and trying not to pass out. The labor lasted 6 hours, not long for a first baby, but long enough that Beth lost all sense of time. There was only pain and breathing, and Agnes's steady voice telling her when to push and when to rest, and that she was doing fine, just fine, almost there. Rachel and Lucas waited downstairs with one of the ranch hands, and Beth could hear Lucas crying on and off throughout the afternoon. She wanted to comfort him, but couldn't spare the energy. All she could do was survive each contraction and trust that Agnes knew what she was doing. I can see the head, Agnes announced. Beth, next contraction you push with everything you've got. You hear me? Beth pushed, and pushed, and pushed until she thought she might split in two. Daniel's hand was crushed in hers, his voice in her ear telling her she was strong, she was brave, she could do this, almost there, almost done. And then release. pressure and pain giving way to the most extraordinary sound Beth had ever heard. A baby crying. "It's a girl," Agnes said, her voice thick with emotion. "Beth, you've got a daughter." Agnes placed the baby on Beth's chest, tiny and red and furious, screaming her displeasure at being born. Beth's hands came up automatically to cradle her, and the crying stopped. The baby's eyes opened dark blue and unfocused, but definitely seeing, and met her mother's gaze. "Hello, sweetheart," Beth whispered. "Hello, my beautiful girl." Daniel was crying, openly, unashamedly crying as he looked at his daughter. "She's perfect." "She is," Beth agreed. "Absolutely perfect." Agnes finished the messy work of birth, while Mrs. Henderson cleaned the baby and wrapped her in soft blankets. When they handed her back to Beth properly swaddled and content, Beth felt something shift in her chest. Some final piece of herself clicking into place. This was her daughter, hers and Daniel's. Proof that she wasn't barren or worthless. Proof that her body could do what Martha Hartley had sworn it never would. Proof that love could create life as surely as desperation could create partnership. "Can we come in?" Rachel's voice from the doorway, tentative and hopeful. "Come meet your sister," Daniel said. Rachel and Lucas crept into the room like they were approaching something sacred. Lucas climbed onto the bed carefully, his eyes huge as he stared at the baby. "She's so small." "You were this small once," Beth told him. "Was I really?" "You really were." Rachel hung back her face uncertain. "What's her name?" Beth looked at Daniel. They'd discussed names but never settled on one. Now looking at her daughter's tiny, perfect face, only one name felt right. "Grace," Beth said. "Her name is Grace." "Why Grace?" Rachel asked. "Because grace is what saved us, not romance or luck or anything else. Just grace, unearned, undeserved, freely given. Grace brought me to that church steps in Silver Creek. Grace made your father offer me marriage. Grace gave us all a second chance." Beth touched the baby's soft cheek. "So her name is Grace. Grace Sarah McCormick, after the two women whose love made this family possible." Daniel's breath caught. "You want to honor Sarah?" "She was your first wife and the mother of two of my children. Of course I want to honor her." Rachel's eyes filled with tears. "Mama would have loved that. She would have loved you." "I hope so, sweetheart. I really do." They spent the rest of the afternoon in that room, a family crowded around a bed, taking turns holding the newest member and marveling at her tiny fingers and perfect nose. Lucas declared himself the best big brother and promised to teach Grace everything he knew. Rachel held her sister with reverent care and whispered promises that she'd protect her always. And Daniel sat beside Beth, his arm around her shoulders, watching their children with an expression of such complete contentment that Beth felt her heart might burst. "Thank you," he said quietly. "For what?" "For this. For them. For taking a desperate bargain and turning it into everything I never knew I needed. I should be thanking you. You gave me a home when I had nothing. You gave me children when I thought I'd never have them. You gave me a reason to keep fighting. We gave each other reasons." He kissed her temple. "And we're going to keep giving them for the rest of our lives." Agnes and Mrs. Henderson stayed until evening, making sure Beth and the baby were both healthy and stable. Before they left, Agnes pulled Daniel aside. "Your wife did good. Real good. Most first-time mothers panic, but Beth stayed calm and focused. She's stronger than she looks. I know. Do you, because you spent 9 months treating her like she might shatter? She's not fragile, Daniel. Stop acting like she is." "I was terrified I'd lose her like I lost Sarah." "Sarah was sick from the start. Beth's healthy as a horse. Different women, different bodies, different outcomes. You need to trust that." Agnes squeezed his arm. "You've got a good wife and 3 beautiful children. Don't waste time worrying about disasters that aren't happening. Just enjoy what you've got." After everyone left and the children were in bed, Daniel and Beth lay together in the quiet room, Grace sleeping in a cradle beside them. "I can't stop looking at her," Daniel whispered. "Every time I close my eyes, I'm afraid I'll open them, and she'll be gone. Like she was too good to be real." "She's real. We're real. This whole improbable, impossible life we've built, it's all real. How did we get this lucky? We weren't lucky. We were desperate and brave and stubborn. We fought for this. Every single day we fought." Daniel turned to face her, his hand cupping her cheek. "I love you, Beth McCormick. I love you more than I thought I could love anyone. You took my broken family and made it whole. You took my broken heart and taught it to trust again. You took everything damaged in me and somehow made it better. You did the same for me. I was nobody when we met. Nothing. Cast out and worthless. You made me somebody. You made me matter. You always mattered. You just needed someone to see it." They kissed softly, carefully, mindful of Beth's exhaustion and the sleeping baby nearby. When they pulled apart, Beth settled against Daniel's chest with a sigh of pure contentment. "What are you thinking?" he asked. "That if someone had told me 9 months ago that I'd end up here married to a Montana rancher mother to 3 children happier than I've ever been, I never would have believed them. And if someone had told me I'd marry a desperate widow off a stagecoach and fall completely in love with her, I'd have called them crazy. We're both crazy then. Best kind of crazy there is." Grace stirred in her cradle, making soft baby noises, but not quite waking. Beth reached over to rock her gently, and the noises stopped. "She's going to be just as stubborn as her mother," Daniel predicted, "and just as protective as her father. God help anyone who crosses her." They fell asleep like that, hands linked between the bed and cradle, their daughter breathing softly beside them. The next weeks passed in a blur of sleepless nights and endless feedings. Grace was a demanding baby, wanting to eat constantly and objecting loudly when she wasn't held. But she was also perfect, all dark hair and serious expressions and tiny fists that gripped Beth's finger with surprising strength. Rachel proved to be an excellent helper, walking the floor with Grace when Beth needed rest and singing the same lullabies Sarah had sung to her. Lucas was less helpful but more enthusiastic, constantly wanting to hold his sister and show her his treasures. "She can't see your rock collection yet," Rachel told him. "She's too small." "When will she be big enough?" "In a few months, maybe." That's too long to wait. But he waited anyway, content to sit beside Beth while she nursed and tell Grace elaborate stories about all the adventures they'd have together. Daniel watched it all with an expression Beth had learned to recognize, wonder mixed with disbelief, like he couldn't quite trust that this happiness was real and lasting. "Stop waiting for disaster," she told him one afternoon. "I'm not. You are. I can see it in your face. You keep expecting something terrible to happen because that's what happened last time. But this isn't last time. This is now, and everything's fine. For now. No, not for now. Just fine. Period." Beth shifted Grace to her other arm. "Daniel, you have to let the past go. You have to trust that we're going to be okay." "What if we're not?" "Then we'll handle it together, like we've handled everything else. But you can't live your whole life braced for catastrophe. That's not living. That's just surviving." He was quiet for a long moment, watching Grace's tiny hand curl and uncurl. "You're right. I know you're right. It's just hard to shake the feeling that I don't deserve this much happiness." "Why not?" "Because I failed Sarah. Failed Rachel and Lucas for years after she died. Failed to see what was right in front of me until you shook me awake. And you think that means you don't deserve good things. Daniel, everyone fails. Everyone makes mistakes. What matters is what you do after, how you grow and change and become better." Beth reached for his hand. "You're a better man now than you were 9 months ago. A better father. A better husband. You've earned this happiness. So have you. Then let's both agree to stop waiting for punishment and just accept that we get to be happy. Deal. Daniel smiled that rare full smile that transformed his whole face. Deal. Summer faded into autumn, and Grace grew from a tiny newborn into a chubby, alert baby who smiled at everything and everyone. She had Daniel's gray eyes and Beth's stubborn chin, and absolutely no patience for being ignored. One October afternoon, while the children were outside playing in the leaves and Grace was napping, Beth and Daniel sat on the porch watching the sky turn orange and gold. "You remember the day we met?" Beth asked. "I remember a desperate woman sitting on church steps in a blizzard too proud to admit she needed help. I remember a stern rancher with two scared children offering me the most insane proposal I'd ever heard. And you said yes." "I did. Best decision I ever made, even though it was completely crazy." Daniel pulled her closer. "You know what I think about sometimes. All the things that had to go wrong for us to end up together. Your husband had to die. His family had to cast you out. You had to run out of money in exactly the right town on exactly the right day. Blackwood had to be threatening me. I had to be desperate enough to propose to a stranger. A lot of pain to lead to this. Yeah, but I can't regret it. I can't wish any of it had been different because then we wouldn't be here. We wouldn't have Grace. Rachel and Lucas wouldn't have you. I wouldn't have—" His voice caught. "I wouldn't have learned that I could love again, that I could trust again, that I could be happy." Beth turned to look at him fully. "Do you know what I think? I think we were both exactly where we needed to be when we needed to be there. Not because of fate or destiny or God's plan, but because sometimes desperate people find each other and build something better than what they lost. Is that what we did, built something better? Look around, Daniel. Look at what we have. 3 healthy children, a ranch that's thriving, a marriage that's real in every way that matters, a future that actually feels possible instead of terrifying." She touched his face. "Yes, we built something better. We built something worth keeping." Inside the house, Grace began to cry her hungry cry that demanded immediate attention. Rachel's voice called out that she'd get the baby, and a moment later, Beth could hear her daughter singing softly as she walked the floor. "She's going to be a good mother someday," Daniel said. "She's already a good sister. And a good daughter. You've raised her well." "We've raised her well. She's as much yours now as mine." It was true. Beth could barely remember a time when Rachel and Lucas hadn't been her children. When Daniel hadn't been her husband. When this life hadn't been hers. The girl who'd sat freezing on church steps with 17 cents felt like a different person entirely. Beth had been nobody, then worthless and discarded, and certain her life was over. Now she was somebody. Wife, mother, partner. The woman who'd taken desperation and turned it into hope. Who'd transformed a business arrangement into genuine love. Who'd proven that second chances were real and possible and absolutely worth fighting for. "What are you thinking about?" Daniel asked, reading her expression. "How far we've come. How much we've survived. How grateful I am that I was desperate enough to say yes to a crazy proposal from a stranger. And I'm grateful I was desperate enough to ask." They sat together as the sun set, painting the Montana sky in shades of fire and gold. From inside came the sounds of their children, Rachel singing, Lucas laughing, Grace's contented coos, the sounds of a family that was whole and happy and hard-won. Beth thought about Judge Morrison's question all those months ago. Why hadn't she left when she could have? When Blackwood died, and the threat dissolved, and she was free to go anywhere, be anyone, start over, somewhere new. The answer was simple. She'd stayed because this was home. Because these people were her people. Because love wasn't something that happened to you. It was something you chose day after day in 1,000 small ways. She'd chosen Daniel when she took his hand on that stagecoach station platform. She'd chosen Rachel and Lucas when she sat with them through nightmares and tears. She'd chosen Grace the moment she felt her move inside her belly. She'd chosen this life, this hard, beautiful, impossible life, and she'd keep choosing it for as long as she lived. "I love you," she said, "not for the first time, and not for the last." "I love you too," Daniel replied, his arm tightening around her shoulders. "Forever." "Forever," Beth agreed. And she meant it. Because Beth McCormick, who'd once been nobody with nowhere to go, had found exactly where she belonged. In a ranch house in Montana, surrounded by children who called her mama, partnered with a man who saw her strength instead of her failures, building a legacy from broken pieces and desperate choices, and the stubborn refusal to give up. She'd been called barren and worthless, cast out and abandoned, left with nothing but 17 cents and a carpetbag full of shattered dreams. But she'd survived. And in surviving, she'd discovered something precious, that the best things in life often grew from the worst moments. That desperation could lead to destiny, if you were brave enough to take the leap. That family wasn't just blood, it was choice and commitment, and showing up every single day even when everything was hard. Beth had been nobody. Now she was somebody. And that somebody was exactly who she was meant to be.